Here they all come. Well, welcome everyone who can hear me. Hello to you. Just letting everyone join. I can see people flooding in now. We've got 144 people registered. Last time I checked, it's probably a bit more now. I don't know how many will actually show up. Some just register for the recording. All right, we'll start bang on 5:30, and it is bang on 5:30, so we're going to get started. Welcome to everyone. Apologies for the half-naked stormtrooper behind me. He is a work in progress. So I'm your host, Will Taylor, and I'm going to be going through a master plan, or you could call this a masterclass on how to pass your NG1 or your IG1 exam, whether you're a national general certificate student or an international general certificate student, NGC, IGC, doesn't really matter. Broadly the same exam. So let me share my screen with you, and I'm also going to kind of familiarize you with some of the functions on Zoom at the same time. So we are on a Zoom webinar, which means we have a chat function, and you can drop questions into the chat at any point. You've also got a Q&A function in there as well. Let me just drop something into the chat right now. So I'll just say, welcome. Feel free to drop comments in the chat at any point. And there's also a Q&A function somewhere on your screen as well. If you have a question, please at any point, just drop in a question into the Q&A. And I'll do my best to see that and respond to it live. Anyway, just to kick us off, I want to discover a little bit more about you. So we're going to do a poll. So I'm going to launch this poll, 3 questions, and I'd like you just to take a moment to just answer those. So I think you've got a multiple choice question there, and also which course provider are you studying with, and in particular, what are you struggling with on the exam? I'm going to try to tailor this presentation as best as I can to the things that you raise on the poll. So I'll just give you a moment or two to answer that. Thank you to the 4 people who've answered so far. I dare say we've got some Compassa students with us tonight, and you are certainly most welcome. But if you're not a Compassa student, you are also very, very welcome tonight. In fact, this masterclass, this webinar is for you, really, because Compassa students, they get all of this advice already in their course. So I'll just give you another 30 seconds or so to answer those questions. Try not to write War and Peace on the third question. Lots of you answering. I can see the majority of you are studying via e-learning. All right, very good. Hopefully with Compassa, but if not, I'm here to help. Some of you doing classroom, distance learning. Okay, I'm going to end that poll now, and I'm just going to take a moment to check out the answers. So first of all, which course provider are you studying with? That'd be interesting. Apparently Zoom needs me to log in before I can view that. I thought I was already logged in. That's the whole point of a webinar, isn't it? Dear me. Technology. Right. So polls and quizzes. View the details. Let's see. So what are you struggling with? I see a lot of you struggling with well, making sure I answer correctly. Yes, sure. Structure of the answer is correct. P technique, understanding the questions, understanding what they're after. How to write the answers. Quoting law. Well, I wouldn't worry too much about the law, to be honest. I mean, you're unlucky if you get one legal question. Someone's just thinking of signing up with us. Well, you'll get to check us out first. Reading the questions correctly. Answer structure. Okay, so broadly speaking, you seem to be struggling with understanding the questions and then writing the answers. Great. Who's studying? Well, we've got some Phoenix in there. We've got some Compassa, Preston College. Oh, hi. Say hi to Mary. She's the tutor at Preston College. British Safety Council, Shields, my old employers. S&A Associates, not heard of them. Shields, Wise Global, my friend Dave there. RRC, and so on. Okay, so we've got quite a broad bunch of people. Right, so let's stop sharing the poll and let's get into our presentation. So just remember, at any point you can ask a question and I will do my best to answer. So hopefully you can see that on the screen. If we have any technical issues, if the sound cuts out, anything like that, please just drop me a message in the chat. So anyway, who am I? Very briefly, I'm not going to spend ages talking about me. My name is Will Taylor. I'm a chartered member of IOSH. And I am the founder, the owner, the MD, whatever you want to call me, of Compassa. We deliver the world's only smart video courses for IOSH and NEBOSH. We do NEBOSH training in a way that no one else does it. I also used to be an examiner. In fact, I used to be a team leader for an examination team for the diploma. I have both of the NEBOSH diplomas, the safety and the environmental diploma. I got 2 Best Candidate awards while I was studying for the diploma. And I've also got a degree, Bachelor of Science with Honours in Safety and Environmental Management. I think I've done a total of 13 different NEBOSH assessments as a student. So I've been through what you have been through and more. And I've been working in health and safety since 2001. So I'm now becoming a very old man. And well, I just wanted to share our pass rates very briefly. So at the moment, we have a system with Compassa that is delivering some of the highest pass rates in industry. I think that's fair to say. I don't know if we are the highest, but I am told that we are in the top 10% in the world for pass rates, and that we are the only company in the top 10% who only does e-learning. So we only do e-learning. We don't do any classroom training. And so we're running at 89% since we launched. Actually, that's going up. Our average, not the average, the overall for the last 12 months has been 92 or 93%. I can't quite remember, but it's trending upwards. And it's thanks to the approach that I'm going to give you tonight. Now, you have a ton of free resources at your disposal, which we already give you for free. So first of all, you've got loads of NEBOSH guidance. That's always useful. You are also going to get a free PDF from us. So tomorrow, you're going to get this in your emails. You'll get a link to this. We usually sell this for about 14 or 15 pounds. If you've registered for this, you'll get a free copy. If you haven't registered for this, then if you're just watching this on YouTube, sorry, you're not going to get a free copy. You'll have to pay for it. You're also going to get this webinar, obviously, which is free of charge. And you've got our YouTube channel as well. Some of you may be familiar with our YouTube channel. But bang, there it is. It's like you have a ton of free advice, loads of video tutorials on exam technique, on questions, on topics, on NG2 and IG2 as well. Let's not forget those. All that absolutely free of charge. And all you have to do to find it is basically just type in NEBOSH in YouTube. Like I think there's us and Stockwell Safety. Like there are just 2 channels which seem to dominate the NEBOSH space. So just type in NEBOSH and you'll find us. There are some paid resources if you wanted some extra help after this. You can purchase our study books if you want to. You're going to see those during the webinar tonight. If your study book from your course provider isn't great, then feel free to buy ours. By the way, Compassa students, you don't need to buy anything. You've got everything included in the course already. So please don't go buy the study book because you've already got it in your downloadable resources folder. Check that out. If you want to do an online course on how to sit your exam, there's an NG1 and IG1 prep course where we take you through exam technique. There's also something, if you wanted tutor support and you're not a Compassa student, you can get access to our rescue package. Basically, you get full access to the NGC course at a super discounted rate. And that includes tutor support, mock exam support, NG2 support, loads of stuff in there. Obviously, you don't want to buy that if everything's going great, but if you really are struggling, head over to the website and apply for the rescue pack. It's on application only. We don't just hand it out to just anyone. Anyway, let's move on to exam stuff. So first of all, there are some basics that I need to cover. And one of the basics is that there's a lot of preparation you need to do before the exam. There's a lot of hard work, as this picture from Rocky 4 suggests. So you're going to have to study, you're going to have to work hard, you're going to have to practice, you're going to have to put the hours and the time in. Because when it comes to it, that preparation is hopefully going to hold you in good stead. You will be ready for the exam, and the exam is going to feel like you are fighting a big Russian Dolph Lundgren in the ring, and he's got some tough questions, and he's going to whack you with those 2 questions, and you're going to feel a bit battered and bruised. That is normal. Nearly everyone has that experience on exam day. But if you follow what I'm going to explain to you, hopefully you'll come out on the other side with a hard-won victory, and you'll feel glorious and fantastic. I'm going to present to you a plan, a 12-step plan. I'm starting to sound like Weight Watchers, but it's not Weight Watchers at all. It is a plan. And here's the first lesson. I would say this: you're going to get hit with some pretty tough questions. It's going to look a bit like this. And your tendency might be to panic, to freeze. And I would say just resist that instinct to panic. Just stick to the plan. There is a plan. Just follow the plan, and you should collect enough marks in order to pass. And our pass rate speaks for itself. Following the plan, Compassa students of 89% of our exam attempts have been successful. 11% of our exam attempts have been unsuccessful for a variety of reasons. So what is the plan? Here's the plan. 12 steps. So step 1, we're going to read the questions, obviously. Step 2, we're going to read the scenario. Step 3, we're going to choose the easiest question. And then we're going to set ourselves a time limit. That's step 4. Now we're going to spend most of our time tonight in step 5 through 8. That's where people struggle. So the first thing is where you are struggling. Most of you said you're struggling to understand the question. So we're going to spend quite a bit of time on how to understand the question. Then we're going to look at the scenario, and we're going to learn how to use the scenario to help us answer that question. And then we're going to talk about something called an answer plan, where you're going to kind of write a list of points, like a shopping list of things you would like to say. And there should be more points than there are marks available. More points than marks available. So if it's a 10-mark question, you're going to have, say, 13, 15, maybe 18 points on there. And once you've done all of that, you are going to write a full answer, possibly using something called the P principle. But there's a little bit of nuance in there. Not every question requires the P principle, and I don't want you to misuse the P principle either. It's just a tool, and it's not the most important thing, but it is a useful technique to help you answer questions. So we're going to spend most of our time there. We're going to use a scenario, we're going to use a question, and you're going to see me do this live. And once you've answered that question, then you can see here, we just go back to the next easiest question. And basically, we just repeat this cycle again and again and again, all the way around until we finish the exam. And basically, that's what step 9 is. Repeat the process for the next easiest question. So you'll keep repeating until you've finished your exam, and then you will go to sleep because you don't have to submit it until the following day. And you'll probably want to wake up the next day a little bit earlier if you can, and just have another look at your answers. Maybe just check that you are on target. Maybe add a point here, add a point there, and fill in your form as well. So you've got some things you've got to do with your form. You've got to get your name, your learner number. You've got to put your references in there. You've got to put your final word count. You've got to save it as a PDF as well. And then finally, submit it on the NEBOSH platform, preferably before the deadline. And then at that point, just forget all about it. Just relax, take a few days or so, and then you can focus on the project. So that's what I'm going to take you through tonight, and we'll focus on steps 5 to 8. But let's do 1 to 4, just very briefly. We'll rattle through these. So the first thing is that we are going to skip the scenario and just read the question. So imagine that it is exam day, and you have you've downloaded the scenario, and now you want to answer the questions. So what we're going to do, I'm going to just make sure I'm sharing the right screen. because I do sometimes make mistakes with my screen shares. I want to share the entire thing. Thank you. And I'm going to drag the scenario over. So this is what we're going to work on tonight. Now, interesting story. Last time I did a webinar, someone, I assume a competitor, and I assume a malicious competitor who would like to see us go down, they reported us to NEBOSH for malpractice and said that I was assisting students in cheating. That was investigated, that was rejected. Nothing was further from the truth. It was a malicious complaint, people trying to weaponize the NEBOSH team which investigates malpractice. Just to be clear, this is not a NEBOSH scenario. I have written this scenario. This is my scenario, my copyright. I own this. And so we're going to use this. So there's nothing confidential in here. And I'm not sharing any NEBOSH marking schemes during this session, just so we're clear. Anyway, I said step one, we skip all that. I'm not interested in the scenario yet. Step one is we read the question. I want to see the questions first because I want to get a sense for what's waiting for me. So here's the question. Risk assessment. Based on the scenario only, comment on whether the risk assessment for the future algae removal work is suitable and sufficient. 12 marks. Note. The HSE document Managing for Health and Safety, HSG65, states that a risk assessment must be suitable and sufficient. So we're just going to do one question. On a normal exam, you'd obviously have anywhere between 5 to 10 questions, depending on what they are. You would read through all of those. So hopefully you can see the presentation back on the screen. So we read the questions. First thing is, don't panic. Stay calm. Stay calm. We have a plan. We're going to follow the plan. You don't have to get all 12 marks. We're going to try to, but you don't have to. You just have to get enough marks to pass. Now, one of the reasons I say read the questions first is because I want you to get a sense of which questions are easier, which questions are harder. For you, that is. It's just your opinion. Which topics are being asked about? And do you recognize any questions? One of the really cool things is if you've got a good course provider who does mock exam questions with you, not that there aren't any good course providers. Everyone's good. Everyone's silver. Everyone's gold. So we're all good, aren't we? Yes, but some are more gold than others, I would say. If you do lots of mock exam questions, there's a chance that you will get 1 or 2 questions on your exam which you've already done in your mock exam questions. And so you will be familiar with the question. And hopefully you've had some nice, useful feedback from your tutor on how to handle that type of question. So you will know the broad approach to take with that type of question. Now, the answer in your mock exam is going to be different to this exam because you can have the same question, but 2 different scenarios. That means the answer might be quite different, to be honest, but the broad approach still applies. So obviously those questions will be easier, and you're going to see very soon that one of the next steps is that you should answer the easiest questions first. But anyway, we have looked at those. Here's the NEBOSH sample. Again, this is not confidential. You can see the big word sample written on there, so you can download this from the NEBOSH website. If you saw these questions, it's like, which one do you think would be easiest? Well, that's a matter of opinion, isn't it? But what happens is when you look at these, some will scare you and some will scare you less, or actually some you might feel very, very confident with. Anyway, at this point, now that we've read the questions, we're going to read the scenario. So let me go back to our scenario. We're going to read it. Well, we are going to read it just once right now, but when you're doing this for real, I would read it a couple of times. And I would draw attention to this, is that each sentence is there for a reason. Like everything they have said in that scenario is there for a reason. There are no wasted words in this scenario. There's nothing there to distract you or to catch you out. It's all there because everything is to be used in some way in answering your questions. So let's just go through this just once to give you an idea as to what's happening. Scenario. As the newly appointed Health and Safety Manager, HSM, at Oakley Gardens, a large conference centre and event space, you've been asked to review and update the health and safety practices. The centre was established 4 years ago and has several indoor and outdoor spaces used for events, a cafe, a garden area with stone pathways, and an underground car park. Oakley Gardens hosts multiple events each week, ranging from corporate conferences to weddings, and it employs about 100 staff, including event coordinators, maintenance workers, catering staff, and security personnel. One morning, a small group of maintenance workers are instructed to remove the algae and rainwater from the stone paths, following heavy rain. Due to regular rain, the paths have become very slippery because of the algae, and this is posing a risk to customers and visitors. The maintenance supervisor, who has been at Oakley Gardens since it opened, provides a general outline of the tasks, but does not conduct a formal risk assessment for the repair work, assuming that the workers already know the area and tasks well. The task involves removing algae from the stone pathways using a combination of pressure washing and a chemical algae remover. The workers are given basic personal protective equipment, PPE, such as gloves and boots, but they are not provided with any specific equipment for working on slippery surfaces or any instruction on the safe use of the pressure washer or the chemicals used. There is also no formal emergency plan in place in case a worker slips or is injured while cleaning. The incident. As one of the maintenance workers is treating a section of the pathway with the chemical algae remover, he slips on an untreated section of path. He falls, landing heavily on his side, and badly sprains his ankle. A colleague eventually hears his shouts for help and locates him, before assisting him to the cafe, where he is given ice for his ankle while waiting for an ambulance. However, no trained first aider is available, so the team improvises with basic first aid supplies. The worker returns to work several days later and is placed on light duties whilst his ankle heals. He has also suffered a minor rash to his back and legs due to lying in the water and being exposed to biocide chemicals. The risk assessment. Following the incident, the General Manager, GM, decides to review the health and safety provisions with you. They mention that Oakley Gardens has experienced a few minor slips and falls in the past, but has never required a formal review of health and safety practices. During the meeting, the GM suggests bringing in an external contractor to conduct the pathway cleaning going forward, due to the specialised nature of the work and the increased risk of slips and falls. You arrange a meeting with the GM, the maintenance supervisor, and a few workers to discuss how to manage the risks associated with maintenance tasks and to conduct a thorough risk assessment for the algae removal work. You explain that the purpose of this meeting is to create a comprehensive risk assessment that addresses hazards, precautions, and emergency measures. You decide to follow a general 5 steps to risk assessment approach. During the meeting, the maintenance supervisor mentions that while they've supervised this type of work many times, they would benefit from specific training on managing risks related to wet and slippery outdoor areas. A maintenance worker mentions that his existing work boots are quite slippery, despite being new, and shows these to the people in the meeting. He then suggests including additional PPE such as non-slip boots for work on wet stone surfaces, as well as a communication device for lone working situations. After the discussion, you draft a risk assessment that includes these additional controls and updates the PPE requirements for similar future tasks. The team agrees that the additional measures will help prevent future accidents and improve the safety of all workers involved in the outdoor maintenance. So that's our scenario, that's our question, and the question is, based on the scenario only, comment on whether the risk assessment for the future, notice the italics, future algae removal work is suitable and sufficient for 12 marks. And then it references HSG 65 talking about suitable and sufficient risk assessment. So we've read the scenario. Now at this point, what I like to do is one of two things, depending on how technologically savvy you are. If you are a little bit old school and you like pens and paper, you should then print out this exam paper and print out as many copies as you have questions. So if it's an 8-question exam paper, print out 8 copies. Personally, I'm a little bit more high-tech. I just like to copy and paste the whole thing into a Word document. And so what you do is you basically just highlight everything on that PDF, and then you right-click, click copy, and paste it into Word so that you have a Word document like this. And that's a Word document there. Step 3 is we now choose the easiest question. Now, on this particular example, we've only got one question, so that's the one we're going to answer tonight. But normally you would have multiple questions. And what I'd like you to do is go with the easiest one first for a number of reasons. Firstly, if you get a 10 or 15 mark question which you think is easy, it's going to boost your confidence a lot if you have a big, well-structured answer which you think is pretty good. I mean, just imagine, let's say you've got a 15 mark question and it's on something really easy, like what are the financial costs from the accident? I mean, that's so easy. Just go straight to your course materials. There's a list of my costs. I just need to write that list in the context of the scenario, and boom, I've got my 15 marks. Your pass mark is 45%. You only need 45 marks to pass. You just got 15 from this easy question. You are 1/3 of the way to passing, and you've only done one question. I mean, that's a big confidence boost, isn't it? So try to get that easiest question down first. I think personally, this will also warm up your brain and get you used to following this 12-step approach. Again, used to reading the question, reading the scenario, creating your answer plan, writing out the answer in full. It'll get you into the routine of how to answer it. And even though it's easy, I would urge you to put in your max effort to get the maximum number of marks available. Because if it is an easy question, you want to get the absolute top number of marks. Now, someone's asked a question, anonymous attendee, thank you for the question. If using Word, is it recommended to save a copy of the scenario per question so that when you go back the following day to review before submitting, you can see which points and evidence you referenced? That's a really good idea. I love that. So basically, you will what you're suggesting is we'll take this and then we'll save this as a question 1 answer plan kind of thing, isn't it? And then you'll see exactly what you've used, what you've highlighted and so on. That's a really good suggestion. If you want to do that, by all means, you go ahead and do that. I don't usually recommend it necessarily, but I love the answer. So love the suggestion, so give it a try. Here we've got a question that's worth 20 marks. The biggest question I've ever seen is a 25 mark question, and it was, what are the negative indicators of health and safety culture in the scenario? 25 marks, and it's such an easy question. It's so easy because you're looking for the negative indicators of culture. They're very easy to spot. It's basically everything bad going on. Everything bad is basically a negative indicator of culture. You got, oh, the risk assessments are generic. Oh, they wouldn't spend the money on this. Oh, people are complaining a lot. Oh, they're not writing down the near miss reports. Oh, the manager hides us in their office all the time. Oh, it's untidy. Oh, people are breaking rules. Oh, people are laughing when people are putting their PPE on and making fun of them. Like, everything is a negative indicator. And so, you can get 25 negative indicators really easy. And then that's one question. You just need another 20 marks out of all of the other questions you've got. It's so easy. So make sure you put maximum effort in on those easy questions. Now, at this point, we're going to do a little bit of maths. We are going to set a time limit for the question. So time management is important. You have 24 hours to do this exam, and you have to sleep, you have to eat, you have to go to the toilet, you have to take care of whatever responsibilities you have, and also have a bit of rest, a bit of downtime. Otherwise, you'll get tired and you won't perform well. So this is how we set a time limit. Firstly, you have to decide how many hours you have available. So, for example, if you might have 8 hours or 9 hours in total. Some people will have more, some have less. It depends on what you have going on in your life. So let's say you start at 11 and you will work from 11 through till about 1 o'clock. You'll have half an hour for lunch, so that's 2 hours. And then from about 1:30 through to, say, 6:30, that's another 5 hours, that's 7 hours in total. And maybe you'll have another hour or two the next day. You might have 8 or 9 hours, something like that. You then multiply the number of hours you have by 60. There are 60 minutes in every hour. So this will give you the number of minutes you have. So if you have 8 hours, you will have 480 minutes. Now you have 100 marks in your exam paper. So what you do is you take the number of minutes you have. So if it's 480, you would divide that by the 100 marks that you have, and that will give you the number of minutes per mark. And then you multiply that by the number of marks in the question. So if that sounds a bit complicated, here's just take this example. You have 8 hours of free time. You multiply the 8 hours by 60, that gives you 480 minutes to answer all of the questions. That gives you 4.8 minutes for every single mark on this exam paper. So you don't want to take any longer than 5 minutes per mark, or you're going to run out of time. Let's say you have a question which is worth 20 marks. You take 20 and you multiply it by 4.8, and that gives you 96. Basically, that's your time limit. You have 96 minutes to answer this question. So read the question, read the scenario again, find all the points you need, write your answer plan, write the answer in full. You have to do it within 96 minutes. And if you haven't finished after 96 minutes, I would just move on at that point, because at that point you are starting to waste time. I've known people to spend hours on one question because they just get lost in the question. And then they've just used up like 25% of their time, or a third of their available time. And then they're rushing to answer the others. And there comes a point, my friends, there comes a point where you can spend another hour on that question, but you're not going to get many more marks. You might get 1 or 2 extra marks, but you're scraping the bottom of the barrel at that point. So just move on when your time runs out. Now, we've got a couple of questions here. I have a question. For a 10-mark question, why do tutors suggest to write 15 points? Well, quite simply because not all, if you just write 10 points, not all of your 10 points might be correct. So let's say out of 10 answers that you give, only 6 are correct. You get 6 marks. But if you write 15 points, maybe out of 15, maybe 9 are correct. And now you have 9 marks. Simple as that. That's why you should try to write more points than there are marks available in the question. Don't write less than there are, because if you have a 10-mark question and you only make 8 points, you will get a maximum of 8 points. Simple as that. Why would you get more points? So it's better to write too many than it is too few. And then the next question is, how important is it to stay within the word limit? There's no word limit. We're going to talk about that later. There's no word limit. There's a recommended word count to give you an idea as to length, but there's no word limit. You don't need to worry about that. Another question. Will, do you lose marks if you have answered most questions but leave 1 or 2 questions unanswered? Yes. Yes, you will not get the marks for the questions that are unanswered. So let's say there's a 20-mark question that you just can't face and you decide not to answer it. Then you are trying to get 45 marks out of 80 marks because you didn't answer the big 20-mark question. So you should answer all of the questions, or straight away you are losing marks. So hopefully you found that helpful. Any more questions? I've done that. I've answered all those, so I'll tick those off. Brilliant. There's something in the chat as well. Someone's asked in the chat, when you note down all your points, is it advisable to use Copilot to summarize, or would this be a mistake? Brilliant question. Thank you for asking that. So Copilot, ChatGPT, what else is there? There's Grok I've heard of. There's a load of, there's even Grammarly as well. Let me bring up this. So what is Copilot? Copilot's this thing up here. So I could basically take this and I can whack this into Copilot. There. And I'll say, I'll ask it the question. Now, this is a terrible idea. An absolutely terrible idea. For a number of reasons. All right. Firstly, there's the answer that it's given. Let me tell you why this is a terrible idea. First of all, that answer is not very good. Just looking at it right now, I can tell you that answer is pretty bad. AI technology is awful at answering questions. There are certain questions which it might do okay at, but broadly speaking, because I've tried it loads of times, just to see what it can do. And as it improves, I've tried it again and again and again. And I use a lot of AI for my own work. It helps me a lot. But it is awful at answering questions that are based on the scenario only. It's awful at analyzing the scenario and giving good comments, good points. It is terrible at making points and properly explaining the points. Now, it will get some marks, there's no doubt about it, but it's not very good. And it will probably cause you to fail. So that's the first reason. Second reason is probably even more important. You will be banned. You'll be banned. NEBOSH have AI detection technology, for one. They have a malpractice policy, too. The malpractice policy, should we just Google it? Let's just go onto the NEBOSH website. Share my screen. Let's bring up this. Let's just do a search for NEBOSH malpractice policy. Malpractice policy and procedures. This was updated back in November of, was it last year or the year before? Time flies so quickly now. But if we have a look in here, let me see if I can find AI, depending on how they've spelt it. Artificial. There you go. So plagiarism. So here's one mention. The definition of plagiarism includes using artificial intelligence, so unacknowledged and excessive copying from public resources, including AI. Basically, you have to show that it is your own work. So using AI's work and trying to pass it off as your own, that's plagiarism and that's banned. Now let me see if I can find other mentions of AI. There it is. Right. Okay. So what was that first one? Go up a bit. No, it's AirPods. AirPods, well, failing. Lost it. Examples of malpractice. Copying, paraphrasing sections of AI-generated content so the work is no longer the learner's own. Copying, paraphrasing whole responses of AI-generated content. And here you go. This is the killer. This next one basically bans all AI. Using AI to complete parts of the assessment so that the work does not reflect the learner's own research, analysis, evaluation, or calculations. You can't even use AI to do the research. So you're not even allowed to use AI just to find a list of generic points. You can't use AI to look up, what does GNC1 say on suitable and sufficient? What does it say about that? That's using AI for research purposes. That's banned under the malpractice policy. You can use Google. Again, Google has AI embedded in it. So be careful of what you do. So NEBOSH are looking out for AI. They have automated detection systems to detect it, and they have examiners, and examiners are not stupid. Examiners can spot AI a mile away. I won't tell you how, because that may give some of you ideas on how to get around it, but do not do it. Just let me just share one more thing, just so you take this super seriously, because this is a very, very serious matter. If I go here, can I find the yeah, here we go. The ethical malpractice report. So here's the ethical malpractice report, the latest one. They did over 1,000 investigations. They identified over 1,000 learners as engaged in malpractice. They issued over 1,400 penalties, and there were 332 people banned. I expect that most of the others had their results voided. So the voided result basically means that you have no result, it's cancelled. You lose your money, you lose your time, and you kind of get a warning. If you do it again, you will be banned. So it's going to cost you time and money. 16 people received lifetime bans because it was so serious. So don't do that in a nutshell. Don't use AI. Couple more questions. Will, how do NEBOSH give marks? Good question. So the examiner has a marking scheme. So basically they have a list, a very simple list. You know, it's not like long sentences or anything. Real simple list of things that you need to mention. You will get 1 mark for mentioning the things that are on that list. Now I say mentioning. You will get a mark for everything that you say that's on that list, provided you have clearly demonstrated it. So some questions will require a bit of an explanation. So just saying one word usually isn't going to get you the mark, but talking about that thing on the list and talking about it with some explanation, with some context linked to the scenario, the examiner can look at that and think, right, they've mentioned the right thing. Have they demonstrated understanding of that thing to the level that's required? Yes, they have. Tick, I'll give a mark for that. If you've just used one word, they'll go, yeah, that's the right point. It's on my marking scheme, but you haven't really demonstrated any understanding there. There's no explanation. There's no connection to the scenario. No, I can't give a mark for that. So there's a marking scheme, and then you have to answer the question fully. So hopefully that answered your question there. So answers done. Will, someone told me in order to receive higher marks, you have to understand the assessment criteria for each element. NEBOSH tests based on that. Is that correct? Well, yes, that is correct. There is assessment criteria, so you have to. Most people don't spend ages looking at the assessment criteria in the syllabus. Most people spend ages studying the course, practicing their questions. But the assessment criteria in the syllabus tell tutors, tells examiners, it tells people what is being assessed and to what depth of knowledge, how far do they go. Someone says, say I finished the exam and went to sleep. I woke up early and added more information and submitted it. However, I did not adjust the word count. Is it okay? Yes, I suspect that'll be okay. Some people don't even bother to fill in the word count and they still manage to pass. It's an annoyance for NEBOSH. Yes, and so I would urge you to put an accurate word count on your form. Are you going to get failed? No. Are they going to void you? No. Are they going to deduct marks from you because you didn't fill in the form properly? No. They're not trying to catch you out. They want you to pass. That's a surprise, isn't it? They want you to pass. So they're not going to penalize you for administrative errors like that. Right, moving on. Hopefully, I think that's all of the questions so far. So let's get back to the slides, which are here. So right, so the point is, we've just calculated the time. Now set your timer. You've got a stopwatch, you've got a clock, you've got a watch, get an alarm on your phone, whatever it is, set that timer and off you go. Right, that's it. We've done steps 1 to 4. Now we're going to do step 5. And this, well, this, by the way, little joke. This is from Indiana Jones. Just be clear, these hieroglyphics here. You might think NEBOSH questions are written in hieroglyphics. You might think they are very, very difficult to understand. I'm going to talk about that later. But this, to be clear, is not a NEBOSH exam question. It's not a NEBOSH exam question. NEBOSH exam questions are a lot easier to understand than hieroglyphics. I'm going to give you a big red alert warning at this point. The red alert warning is this. You will pass or you will fail on step 5. This step of reading the exam question is absolutely crucial. You pass or fail here. Simple as that. People who fail the exam usually have failed to read the questions properly. Not always, but usually. So if you're someone who has failed and you're here to get help, there's a good chance that you just didn't read the questions very well. So here, this is where I bring up my smug NEBOSH tutor face. And I'm a NEBOSH tutor and I can be quite smug. And I know others who are quite smug. Us smug tutors, we have an acronym. If you're a tutor on this call, by the way, you are very welcome, especially if you're a smug one. Our acronym is this, and it is RTFQ. I'm not going to tell you what the F stands for. You can work that out yourself. It's a rude word, but it's read the question. We have that acronym, read the question. What we're going to do is we're going to chop this question apart. We're going to dissect it, just like we dissected an alien in Independence Day or an alien in the movie Alien, funnily enough. We're going to chop it to pieces. Every single word in that question matters. Because, my friends, when NEBOSH write a scenario and a question, this isn't written just by one person. It's not written by ChatGPT or Copilot. This is written by someone and then it goes through a committee. It goes through a team of people who review the wording. And they'll even try to answer the question just to see how people interpret it. And so it's actually a really funny exercise. I did this on my examiner training. I don't know if they still do it, but the first thing they do on examiner training is that they ask you to write an exam question. And then you have to give it to your colleague next to you, and they have to answer the question you just asked. And then they give you their answer, and you read it, and you go, that's not at all what I was asking for. And then you have an argument with them, because they say, that is what you asked for. Look, that's what your question says. This is how I understood it. It's a humbling experience, because it makes you realize just how hard it is to write a very clear question. And NEBOSH put a ton of effort into writing their questions. And they don't always get it right, of course. You know, they're human like everybody else, but they're pretty good. And they learn from experience. So if a question comes out, and it's the very first time that question's ever been asked, and students misread it or they answer completely off on a tangent, NEBOSH asks for feedback from the examiners every single time, and the examiners will say, people didn't answer that one very well. They were talking about this, they were talking about that, and NEBOSH will learn from that and adjust the question next time it comes around. And so many questions get asked repeatedly. And so by the time it's been asked on your paper, chances are that question is as clear as it possibly can be. So every single word matters in this question. They will delete any words that are not necessary. And questions include signposts. There are signposts which tell you where to go and where not to go. Not all questions have signposts, but most do. And if we look at our question, which is here, can you spot the signposts? So the italics is a pretty good clue, isn't it? They put something in italics, they're trying to draw attention to it. And then we've got a very strange, what we call stem here, which is drawing attention to a particular guidance document. And that's there for a reason. These are signposts. And I've known some people who have ignored signposts and then, well, just haven't answered the question properly. And whose fault is it then? Of course, those people then tend to blame NEBOSH and say, oh, NEBOSH didn't write a very clear question. No, I'm sorry, the question was very clear. You just didn't pay attention to the signpost. So here's our question. Let's go through the structure of this. Firstly, we have a title. The title is important. The title tells you, to go back to the question someone asked earlier about assessment criteria, the question tells you what part of the syllabus we are testing. So if you go into your study book, and we have study books, let me see if I can find the study book. Here's our study book right here. You've got a question on risk assessment. Well, go to the table of contents. Chances are the section on risk assessment in here is going to be helpful. Where is it? There it is. This section here on risk assessment is going to be helpful to you in answering that question. So we've got a title. Then we have a question. Then we have the number of marks. That's important because it tells you how many points you have to make. This question is asking for comments. How many comments do I have to make to get full marks? Well, a minimum of 12 correct comments where you comment with enough depth of explanation to get the mark. So at least 12, but hopefully more. And then we have something called a stem. Now, there are many types of stems. We saw some stems a little bit earlier. Let's see if I can bring some stems back up. If I just jump a little bit further back in my presentation. Here we've got some stems. The most common type of stem is this one here. We see that on most questions, but it's not the only type of stem. Many stems are... some questions have no stem, actually. No stem at all. We'll have a look at one of those a little bit later on. So we've got the stem. Let's jump back to where I was. There we are. So we've got all of those. So let's now dissect this question word for word. Remember, that's what I said. I said dissect the question word for word. I mean dissect it. I really do mean let's dissect it word for word. So let's go through that. Jump forward. Here it is. Now, this is where you're going to need a dictionary. And I'm not saying that to the people who are non-native English speakers. We've got quite a few non-native English speakers here, and you're very welcome. You could be from England for all I know, and you live here, or you could be from India or Pakistan, or you're very welcome. But when I say get a dictionary, I'm actually talking to the native English speakers. Because us English people, we assume we know what words mean because we use them all the time. But if I were to ask you what the word comment means, could you tell me without looking it up? Some of you can, some of you can't. If you've got children, you'll have experienced this. Daddy, what does this word mean? Mummy, what does this word mean? And you kind of know what it means, but you can't explain it. And when you look it up, sometimes it's not at all what you thought it meant. So it's useful to get a dictionary. So what do we got? Based on the scenario only. That's important. It means your comments here are going to be based on the scenario only. What does that mean? It means that information from the study book, and here's the study book, you might find information in here and it might be useful to you, but the study book is not going to have the answers, the exact answers in any case, because we have a scenario and the scenario is unique. And our comments must be based on this scenario and nothing else. None of the case studies, no past exam papers, no theory. Your comments must be ultra specific to the scenario. So based on scenario only, comment. Now, if we go to our good friend Google, let's go to Google. I'll look it up here. This is where I'm just going to type in comment meaning. And I really do want you to do this on exam day. I'm not exaggerating. Do this on exam day. I used to do this. I used to take a dictionary to exams and I used to look up the words. A comment is a verbal or written remark expressing an opinion or a reaction. So when it asks you to comment, you're being asked for opinions. You are giving your opinion on things. So we could rephrase this to say, give your opinion. So let me just type that out. I'm going to say here, give your opinion. Oops. There we go. Give your opinion on whether. Whether? What does whether mean? Well, it's this or that. Whether. I'm not quite sure. Daddy, what does whether mean? You know what? I actually don't know. So let's just type it in. Whether, meaning. Expressing a doubt, a choice between alternatives. Whether. So the question is, because it's asking about whether the risk assessment is suitable and sufficient. Well, so is it suitable and sufficient, or is it not? You have to give your opinions, at least 12 opinions, at least, hopefully more, 12 plus opinions on whether the risk assessment is suitable and sufficient. So let me just type that in, right? Is it or not? And so what you might find here is that you might have a variety of different comments. You might have some comments that say, yes, it is. And you might have some comments that say, no, it isn't. Well, it is suitable and sufficient in this way, but it's not suitable and sufficient in that way. So the whether is about whether there is an alternative here. It's like yes and no, pros and cons. Whether the risk assessment, that's kind of a key word, isn't it? Risk assessment. The risk assessment now, interesting. It's important that you understand the topics in the question. Now, we had an exam in April, and one of my students read the questions, and I spoke to them after, and it was very clear to me that they didn't understand the topic the question was asking about. They'd looked up the other words, but they hadn't looked up the topic. And so they'd answered incorrectly because they thought the topic was this, but actually it was something else. I'll give you an example of this, a very common one. Human factors. A very common question is on human factors, and it's like comment on the organizational human factors which contributed to the incidents, or comment on the individual human factors which could have contributed to the incident. And people get confused between the three different human factors: organizational, job, individual. And so they read individual, but they kind of blank it out and they just see human factors and they say, oh, human factors, all that organizational stuff. And off they go with an organizational human factor answer. But the question is saying individual. And it said it in italics. The words were like this: individual, to like pay attention. We want the individual ones, nothing else. So that's an example of a signpost. So what would you do? Well, if you get a topic like that, you would just go to the study book and look up, where is our study book again? Go to here and say you've got a question on human factors, bang. Click on here, human factors, and you get to the individual human factors, bang, there we are, individual human factors. You've got all these, loads of examples. Great, you could use that and more as well. You know, the study book doesn't necessarily have all the answers because it's based on the scenario only in this particular question. So let's carry on. Notice we've got another signpost there, the future algae work. Why future? Why does it say future? Because in the scenario, it's talking about the past algae work. It's talking about this algae work, but that's in the past. This is the one which led to the accident. Now we're risk assessing the future algae work, which might possibly be done by a contractor. So it's asking actually about whether this bit here in the scenario, this whole section about the risk assessment, is this suitable and sufficient, the future algae work. And so it's asking for the risk assessment for the algae removal work, nothing else. So there might be other tasks in your scenario. We're talking about other things, and it's like, it's not those things, it's this only. And then it says suitable and sufficient. And then you've got a STEM, and it says the HSC document, Managing for Health and Safety, HSG 65. And if you're a national student, you should have studied that or covered it a bit in your element 2 part of the course. And it states that a risk assessment must be suitable and sufficient. Now, what is it getting at there? Well, it's saying that risk assessments have to be suitable and sufficient, yes. And there are criteria that a risk assessment has to meet. And so the document says a suitable and sufficient risk assessment is this, that, and this, and that. And it's asking you to give your opinion. You are contrasting, in a sense, the algae work risk assessment versus what the document says. So the document gives us the definition of suitable and sufficient, and the question's asking for your opinion, a series of opinions. Is this risk assessment, does it meet that criteria, yes or no? Or is it a mixture of the two? In your opinion, is it suitable and sufficient, and why? Why? That's where you're going to get the marks. Why? Show your understanding of the suitable and sufficient criteria, and show us how you can recognize that in practice, how you can recognize good and bad risk assessments. That's basically what the question's getting at. Now, you might be pulling a face like this when you see suitable and sufficient. What's that all about? HSG 65? I don't know. Well, it's very simple. All you have to do is you take your study book, your course materials. Excuse me. Now, if you don't have the Compassa study book, that's fine. You've got your own study book. If you're an RRC student, they've got a study book. They've got course materials. Doesn't matter who you're studying with. They've all got a book. Now, some books are better than others, sure. Right? But what we tell our students to do is you get your study book out and you go to your study book and you ask yourself the question, what on earth is HSG 65? And what makes a risk assessment suitable and sufficient? And so you'll go to the study book and you'll do a search and it'll bring up this. Notice here, if you look carefully, I've done a search, suitable and sufficient. And look, it's just brought it all up for me. What makes a risk assessment good enough or suitable and sufficient? And it takes us through, according to HSG 65, that's what it is. And so what you're doing at that point is you are looking at the risk assessment at Oakley Gardens and you're saying, is this risk assessment, does it look like this or not? How do I know? What did they do? And is what they did Does it meet this criteria or not? So here, this last one there, you involved your workers or their representatives in the process. That's one of the criteria. It's suitable and sufficient if you involve the workers. Well, you tell me. You tell me. We'll have a look at it here. And you see, you arrange a meeting with the GM, the maintenance supervisor, and a few workers. You tell me, based on that. Bang, there's a mark there. You mention that, and you link it. Here's the thing. You've got to link it to the suitable and sufficient criteria. You've got to say, a suitable and sufficient risk assessment is one where you involve the workers. And at Oakley Gardens, they did involve the workers because they had a meeting with the maintenance workers. And they talked about the risk assessment. So you're showing understanding of what's going on in the scenario, and you're showing understanding of what suitable and sufficient looks like in practice. Now, let me have a look at some questions here. I've got Q&As coming up. In the marking scheme, is every answer limited to only one mark? Is every answer? Yes. You can only get one mark for mentioning something. And if you mention it twice or 3 times or 4 times, you will not get 2, 3, or 4 marks. You will only get 1 mark. And the way the examiners do it is that they have something called they have to annotate your exam paper. So when they annotate, they're using ticks. Let me get a tick here. There we are. They're using ticks like this. And then when there's an answer that you've already given and they've already given a mark for it, they will put AA next to that. They annotate your exam paper to say, I have already awarded AA. That's what it stands for. So I've spotted it. I recognize that that's a mark-worthy point, but I've already given that mark up here, and I'm not giving it again. So there's hopefully a short answer to your question. Someone says, surely if you're giving your opinion and can demonstrate how you got to your conclusion by giving over 12 opinions, as opinion is based on what you believe is right or wrong, am I right in thinking that no answer can be wrong as opinion is based on individual belief? Okay, that is a very, very deep philosophical question. And I could go down a rabbit hole there, but I'll give you this. There is such a thing as truth. There is such a thing as reality. No answer can be wrong. Yes, it can. Yes, it can. All answers can be wrong. Depends on what the standard is. The standard is the marking scheme. If I say 2 + 2 = 6, that's wrong. Now you're saying, yes, but that's not an opinion. That's a matter of fact. That's true. But we also have a matter of fact here. We have the standard of HSG 65, which says that's what a good risk assessment should do. That's what it should look like. And you have what happened in the scenario. And that's also a matter of fact. Did they involve the workers or not? Did they visit the site or not? Did they consider other sources of information or not? That's a matter of fact. It's not a matter of opinion. Now, sure, it says comment, give your opinion, and you can. When we're watching a movie, is the movie good or bad? That's a matter of opinion, and there's nothing right or wrong there. But there is such a thing as right or wrong when it comes to NEBOSH exams, because there is a standard, and that's the marking scheme, and your answers are either on that marking scheme or they are not. And you can disagree with the marking scheme if you like, but should we pay attention to people who are not qualified to have an opinion on such things? There's one for you. That marking scheme has been through a committee of professionals, and they've picked it apart, and they've added things, and they've taken things out. Anything you say, I would say this is nearly always true, maybe not always true, but nearly always true. If you think something's mark-worthy and it's not on the marking scheme, it's nearly always true that you're wrong and they're right. I'm afraid that's just a brutal truth. Sorry to be brutal there. And it doesn't matter anyway. The marking scheme is what it is. It doesn't really matter whether you agree with it or not. That's just the way it works. Do you have a copy of the marking scheme so you can share it with us to understand further? No, I don't. NEBOSH keep their marking schemes highly confidential. I don't get to see the marking schemes as someone who is no longer an examiner. None of the course providers get the marking schemes. So I am using my experience here as an ex-examiner to help you with this. And I'm not going to give you the marking scheme for this question. I'm going to give you an answer plan that I would give to this question, and whether that is the marking scheme, I don't know. It's up to NEBOSH. But I think we're on the right track, you know, when we have 89% pass rates. I think we're doing pretty good. So marking schemes are confidential. And don't listen to anyone who says they've got the marking scheme. They're probably lying. I have a question. How can we start to give an answer for a question? Like, what's the first point for that? We'll come to that. We'll come to that. We haven't started answering the question yet. We're just trying to understand the question. That's the first thing you need to do before answering, is understand the question. But I will show you very shortly how to structure your answer. Anyway, let's get on with it. Back to the presentation. We're on step 5, and there we are. So the point I was making is, if you don't understand the topic, go to your course materials, look at the topic and find out what's going on. Now, the number of marks, I've already made this point multiple times, so I'll do this quickly. The number of marks tells you how much to write, how many comments you need to make. If you have, say, a 10-mark question, you've probably got 15 to 20 things on the marking scheme. There are always more points on the marking scheme than there are marks available. So a 25-mark question probably has about 35 different things you could say. So when you're really struggling for answers, believe me, the answers are there. They really are there. You just need to figure them out. So if you have a 12-mark question, we're going to try to give 15 to 20 answers. Now, here are the 3 amigos. There are 3 types of NEBOSH question. This is going to be helpful in understanding what the questions are asking for. The first type of question is probably the easiest, but it's also the rarest. The first one is theory only. It's a question which requires no link to the scenario. It's just asking you a real basic theoretical question, and you can probably just look up the answer in your course materials. Now, be careful. Don't go copying and pasting things from the internet or things from books or things from Copilot and passing it off as your own work. That's a big no-no. Use your own words to make the points, or you will get done for malpractice. So you use your own words, but you will have to, I'm just afraid you just have to paraphrase what your course materials say. The second type of question is, the question is asking a mixture of theory plus inferred points from the scenario. So you may get marks for theoretical points, and there will also be some marks available for things you can bring out of the scenario and mention along the way. That's the most common type of question. Quite an easy type of question as well. It's not a difficult type of question, provided it's a nice, simple topic, a small topic. It's a bit harder when you have a very broad topic, a very broad question. Most questions are amigo number 2. Amigo number 3 is based on the scenario only, and only things that are from the scenario or inferred from the scenario are mark worthy. So let me give you some examples. Advise the MD on the differences between an audit and a workplace inspection. So in this scenario, there's some kind of audit taking place, there's an MD, and you have to advise this MD on the differences between an audit and a workplace inspection. Which type of question do you think that is? Well, that's a theory only question. It's just asking for the differences. It's not asking what's the difference between the audit in the scenario and the inspection in the scenario. It's not asking about that. It's just asking for the basic, which is what's the difference between an audit and an inspection. It's theory only. So if you get that type of question, which has no link to the scenario, and notice as well, very important, what's missing? There's no stem. There's no, please note, you should support your answer with relevant information where applicable from the scenario. It doesn't say that. So there's literally no link to the scenario here. What do you do? Well, you go to your course materials, go get your Compassa study book, and you go look up the difference between audits and inspections. Bang, there they are. Audits, inspections, there are your answers. 1 mark, 2 marks, 3 marks, 4 marks, 5 marks, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 things there. 10 basic answers. And that was a 10-mark question. So we've got 10 in the course materials. There might be some more things on the marking scheme which we haven't got in the course materials. but you've got enough to get full marks there. Next, what was I going to say? Just to repeat, do not copy anything from the books. Again, malpractice policy, as a reminder. Also, this is in your exam instructions. By submitting this completed assessment for marking, you are declaring it is entirely your own work. By knowingly coming to work to be your own when it's someone else's work is malpractice, which has severe penalties. And you must not collaborate with or copy work from others, whether that's a human or whether that's Copilot or ChatGPT. Neither should you cut and paste blocks of text from the internet or other sources. So just bear that in mind. No copying stuff. Because all it takes, all it takes is 2 of you. We've got 61 people on the call right now. It only takes 2 of you to copy something from the Compassa study book or the RRC book or the Phoenix book, and the automated malpractice detection software will go, oh, look, we've got two identical pieces of text from these 2 students. And they haven't referenced it. They haven't mentioned where that's from. They've just copied and pasted the whole chunk and whacked it in. They're going to be asking you questions if you do that. And it's not going to be nice. So, next question. Within the health and safety management system, the role of manager has specific health and safety responsibilities for assessing removal requirements. What could be done to help ensure the manager is more effective in carrying out their health and safety role and responsibilities? 10 marks. And here we have a STEM. Note, you should support your answer where applicable using relevant information from the scenario. So it's asking for relevant information from the scenario, but it says where applicable. So so it's saying, what can the manager do to be more effective? And maybe in the scenario, you can see that there's something they're not doing very well. And you could say, I don't know, you could maybe one of the answers is they've got to visit the workplace more often. They've got to just be more present in the workplace. That's a theoretical point. And maybe in the scenario, they're just hiding in their office all the time. So if you say managers will be more effective if they get out into the workplace and become more visible, and this particular manager needs to get out of their office and spend more time in the warehouse. Can you see how we've used relevant information from the scenario to support the point we made about being more visible? So this question is asking for a combination of theory and points from the scenario to support it. So we can take ideas from the course materials, we can take ideas from the internet, and we can then link those to our scenario. And you can also make other suggestions. You might find your course materials or the internet are not super helpful. You might find there are other things that can be inferred, taken from the scenario. So don't assume that your course materials have the answer to every question. They often don't. So the Compassa study book, back to that. You ask yourself the question, how can we help managers become more effective? And what do you find? Bang, you've got a whole section here. I mean, it literally says, how do you ensure managers are effective at carrying out their health and safety responsibilities? Bang, like da-da-da-da-da, all of that. All of that. That's what they do. If those are relevant to the scenario, you could use them as suggestions. We can't say that every single one of these is going to be relevant to every single scenario, but if you think it is relevant, and particularly if you can link that to something that's going on in the scenario, write it down as part of your answer. Next question, last one here. Based on the scenario only, what are the negative indicators of health and safety culture in this organization? 25 marks, beautiful. This is amigo number 3. Only points from the scenario are relevant. Now, that doesn't mean the course materials are useless, not at all. Because if you don't know what a negative indicator of health and safety culture looks like, if you just don't know what it is, then you can go to your course materials and you might find that they have some suggestions. But to be clear, the only mark-worthy points are going to be the ones that are from the scenario or can be inferred from the scenario. So back to the study book. What's a negative indicator of culture? And bang, there we are, whole massive list there. We don't have 25, I don't think, I've not counted. There's quite a lot there, but that should give you a good idea as to the kinds of things to look for And then you can go to the scenario and look for that kind of stuff and more, and hopefully get your 25 marks. All right. So back to our question here. What type of question is this? Well, this is based on the scenario only, which means it's amigo number 3. Only things from the scenario are mark-worthy. And I said earlier that what we're trying to do here is understand the question and what it's after. Understanding a question is partly about understanding every single word in that question, because it's pointing you towards the answer. But it's also understanding the topic. And so what I've showed you here is that you need to look up the topic in your course materials to make sure that you know what it's talking about. Do you know what suitable and sufficient means? If not, go look it up. Now I'm going to drop some brutal truth bombs here. And I apologize if I accidentally insult anyone. I don't mean to, and I don't mean to be patronizing either, but I'm just going to say it as I see it. Most NEBOSH questions are written in plain English. NEBOSH have a plain English award. And some people might laugh at that, but no, but they have the award. They write their questions in plain English. And I often hear people say things like, I didn't understand the question was vague, the question used strange language, it was a strangely worded question. And I also hear people say things like, you have to answer using NEBOSH language, you have to use NEBOSH's words. I hear this all of the time. Nothing could be further from the truth. Absolutely nothing. This is how I feel when people say this to me. When people say NEBOSH questions are written in NEBOSH speak, I just want to smack them. I don't smack them, of course, because I don't go around smacking people. But it's like, if you don't understand the question, you didn't read it properly. And that's the brutal truth. Here's a NEBOSH question written in plain English. That person thinks this question makes no sense. And straight away I know that person hasn't read the question properly. Now, are there exceptions to this? Yes, Lord knows there are exceptions to everything in life. First time they ask a question, yeah, sometimes you get a bit of a duff question. It's not their fault. They've tried their hardest. No one can anticipate what you, the student, is going to write. But, most questions have been through the routine of being, tested. So I would say if you don't understand the question, go back and read it again. And so here are some final points on this. Just to re-emphasize it again. If you don't understand the question, work through it word by word. Make sure you read that stem super carefully. Use a dictionary. Don't just assume you know what the word means. Look up the topics. And I would say, most importantly, take some responsibility for your difficulty in reading a perfectly clear question. This is your difficulty. It's your problem. Take some ownership of it. As an unpopular IT manager once told me, I rang up the IT manager. I said, "Oh, there's a problem with this computer." He said, "I know what the problem is. It's somewhere between the keyboard and the chair." And what he meant was me. I'm between the keyboard and the chair, and I had to take ownership. And he was right. It was actually me who was causing the problem in the meantime. Right, before I move on to the next bit, let me take some questions. So what have we got? We've got loads of questions. My goodness. New one. After making your 12 answers, should you end with a final conclusion? No. We don't need introductions. We don't need conclusions. No, we don't. I hope that's clear. Can we add heading from the books with a reference? You can use headings. Yeah, I mean, the NEBOSH instructions say, do not cut and paste blocks of text from a book. It says you shouldn't do that. Now, can you quote a book? Yes, you can. You can quote a book. You can say HSG65 says this, and you can copy a sentence if you want. That's not like a block of text. You haven't dumped an entire block of text in there. But you could say HSG65 says this. You could say the law says this, the Health and Safety at Work Act, or the ILO convention if you're an international student. It says this. Here's the duty. Bang. You've referenced it. It's a short bit of text. That's fine. What they don't want is you copying a whole page and saying, bang, there's my answer. That's not going to work. Have I got another question? I've got one question in the Q&A. Are grammar errors punished with marks? No, no, grammatical errors are not punished. It's not a spelling test. It's not a grammar test. It would be illegal, actually. It would be completely illegal under the Equality Act in the UK to punish you for grammatical errors or spelling errors, because some people who are neurodivergent, got dyslexia, dyspraxia, and so on, they just don't spell very well. It's okay. So we can't penalize them for that. It has to make sense, though. It has to make sense, as the examiner must be able to read it and understand the point you're making, and you have to be able to communicate. So yeah, you're not going to get penalized for grammar or spelling, but if your answer makes no sense, because maybe you're just not very good at writing, you're just not very good at communicating, which is a big problem for some people, you will lose marks for that, because the examiner doesn't know what you're trying to say. And they're not allowed to guess what you're trying to say as well. They're not allowed to be telepathic. So, just to recap where we are. We haven't made a lot of progress, but that is the most important step. So I've spent a long time going through that one. Step 5, you pass or fail there. Now, we're going to read the scenario, and we're going to look for points and evidence that we can use. So at this point, we're going to go to the scenario, and this is not a NEBOSH scenario, by the way. The NEBOSH scenario we have is a lot more clear cut. So let me show you what I want you to do. Firstly, there's a bit of a sub step here. Again, look up the course materials. So let's just do this. I'm going to take you to my course materials, and we're going to do a search for suitable and sufficient, like this. And that's going to take us, we might have to do more than one search, because that's a bit of law. Well, there we go, we've got that bit there. I want a bit more than that. I want a bit more detail, There we are. So this is the page I'm looking for. So before I start looking for answers in the scenario, before I start looking for my comments, I'm going to read this. And perhaps a little bit more. Oh, no, that's it. That's all there is. That's all we've got. A proper check was made. We did a thorough job, not paperwork or desktop exercise. We visited the location. We made some inquiries. We put some effort into it. I asked who might be affected. Do I speak with the workers who are affected? Do I ask who is affected by this risk? Do I deal with the obvious significant hazards? Does my risk assessment lead to precautions that are reasonable? Is the risk low at the end? Do I involve workers or their representatives in the process? Now that's theory. Now I've got a scenario which is testing me on my understanding of the theory. So that's what I look for. And you can also use Google. You could just Google HSG65, look up the document, and then search in that document for suitable and sufficient, and bang, this is what we get. And we get a bit more, by the way. It talks about being proportionate to the risk. It talks about insignificant risks can be ignored. It says the detail should be proportionate and appropriate to the nature of the work. So it gives us a little bit more there on that. And so what I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to go through the scenario, and I'm going to highlight things in the scenario which are going to help me answer this question. Now, if you have a theoretical question, to be clear, if you have a theory question, remember amigo number 1, Steve Martin, you don't need to do this, because a theoretical question is going to be just course materials, Google, internet, reference document. You don't use a scenario. So you can skip this step for those types of questions. But most questions are going to require that you use the scenario. So we're going to go for the scenario. There are 2 different ways you can highlight things. Well, lots of different ways, actually, more than one. But I use these 2. I sometimes just use colors and I highlight like this. Sometimes I use comments. So I might highlight something and right-click and add a comment. And then I'll write something down. Depends what type of question I'm doing. You can highlight things any way you like. But what is it going to look like? Let's see if I can find my a piece of work that I prepared earlier. So here it is. Let me drag it across. Hopefully you can see that on the screen. I've gone through it and I've started to highlight things. So remember what I'm looking for. I'm looking for Evidence of this. Did they do a proper check? Did they make inquiries as to who was affected? Did they deal with the obvious risks? Were the precautions reasonable? Is the risk low? Right, what precautions did they introduce? Did they bring the risk down? Was it effective? Did they involve people in the risk assessment process? I'm looking for stuff like that. So I noticed that we've got some algae in rainwater. I've noticed that there's a risk to customers and visitors. So there is a risk to customers and visitors. We've got some risks. We've got pressure washing. That's a risk. We've got the chemical. It's a risk. There's no formal emergency plan. We've got a chemical. We've got eventually written here. We've got no trained first aid. I'm just highlighting things which I might find useful. There's a rash, right? So I know this chemical here is actually quite dangerous. Why does that matter? Well, it matters because it's an obvious significant risk, isn't it? Do they take precautions for the chemical? We've had some falls in the past. Ah, right, okay. So we've had some falls in the past. They're going to bring in a contractor. They're talking about bringing in a contractor. Why does that matter? Well, that's someone who might be affected. The contractor might be affected. So that matters. You meet with the GM, the maintenance supervisor, and a few workers. Why does that matter? Because we're involving workers in the process. And they are also people who might be affected. We want to do a thorough risk assessment. All right, so we want to do a thorough risk assessment. We're going to do a comprehensive risk assessment, a risk assessment that has the hazards, the precautions, and the emergency measures. And we're going to follow a general 5 steps approach. The maintenance supervisor is, well, they're quite experienced. And so that takes us back, I think, to you involved workers. People who are affected. You want to involve experienced people in this. He's suggesting that, or they're suggesting that they want specific training. This other worker says his existing work boots are quite slippery. Now, why does this matter? Well, it's because this risk assessment has to have controls, precautions that are reasonable. The end result has to be a risk assessment which introduces all of the reasonably practicable controls. The risk should be reduced so far as is reasonably practicable, and we should end up with a low risk. So is this risk assessment, which they're doing right now, is it leading to everything that they should do being done, and is it giving us a low risk? So they're talking about the boots. He then suggests some different boots, basically, non-slip boots, and he suggests a communication device for lone working. And then after that, we draft the risk assessment. So the question is this risk assessment suitable and sufficient according to this standard? What are your opinions? So is that risk assessment suitable and sufficient? This risk assessment includes these additional controls, right? So it includes the training. It includes the non-slip boots. It includes the communication device. Great. What's missing? What's missing? That matters, doesn't it? So you could say, well, it's good because you've got these things. Brilliant. But is there anything else missing? Like any emergency measures? Any first aider? Any formal emergency plan? So there's good and there's bad, isn't there? Those issues have not been addressed in this risk assessment. The issues here have been addressed. Now, it's interesting, isn't it? Because this is the thing with NEBOSH exams. When it says based on the scenario only, you might think that I can literally just copy stuff from the scenario. Oh, the answer's there, the answer's there, the answer's there. And that is true a lot of the time. But there's a lot of stuff on that marking scheme which is not written down in the scenario. There's the word infer. Infer. What does infer mean? Infer, you know, they teach us at primary school, you know. It's like teaching kids how to infer things is actually very, very hard. So let's go to our friend Google and type in the word infer. This is very hard to infer things. That's why they teach kids to do it. To deduce, to conclude something from evidence and reasoning rather than from explicit statements. You could infer a trend from the figures. Ah, yes, the figures, the statistics. The statistics don't tell you that accidents are rising, that there's a trend of increasing accidents. No, the statistics don't say that. They're just numbers. You have to deduce it. You have to infer it. So you have to infer things from the scenario. And I can infer from this scenario that actually it's not suitable and sufficient for a number of reasons. Doesn't say that though, does it? So let me take some quick questions. Someone's asking, how can I get a recording for this session? No problem. You'll get a recording tomorrow in your emails. So it is recorded and you'll get a link to it tomorrow. Someone's asking, where do we get the study book? Is this the link to the study book? Yeah, basically, yeah, if you wanted to get it, no problem. I'm not here to sell the study book, by the way. Just sell itself. Whoops, no, wrong one. I just go on to, here we go. Got the, copied the wrong message there. If I go here to the Compassa website, you can find it in the menu, or you can just go to NEBOSH exam resources. Go here, IG1 study book for the international students, NG1 study book there for NGC. It's PDF copy only, which is what you want. You don't want a hard copy, you want PDF copy, so you can search for things. You can't search in a paper copy. So PDF is better. Anyway, where are we? Well, we've just read the scenario again. We've highlighted points for evidence. Let's carry on. I've got a couple of questions, but I'll deal with them shortly. Now we're going to write an answer plan. That's step number 7. So we're not going to write a full answer. I just want a short, not a short list. No, that's wrong. I want a list of short answers, more points per marks. This is kind of what it's going to look like. It's going to look something like that. List. Most of the time, lists will not get marks. Most of the time. Now, there are exceptions to that, depending on the question. Those exceptions are rare and infrequent. So most of the time, you won't get marks for this. So, but let's just first write down all of our answers. So you might write down something that looks a bit like this. This is a plan. This is not an answer. It's just a plan. Short answers only. Now, your answer plan should include all of the points that you wish to make, points that directly answer the question. So all of my comments and all of the relevant information from the scenario which support those comments. So perhaps I were to say, they did not do a proper check. That's because suitable and sufficient risk assessments are those where there's a proper check. And I'm going to say they don't do a proper check because this is what happened in the scenario. So I'm going to write down my points and the relevant information in the scenario. Now, if we look at our exam instructions, on your exam paper, you have instructions, and it says, so this is about marking schemes, everyone. So those of you who asked me about marking schemes, here's what it says. You will get a mark for each correct technical point. So your point has to be correct. That means it's on the marking scheme. If it's not on the marking scheme, it's not correct. For each correct technical point, that is clearly demonstrated. So you have to explain it, make it clear. Avoid writing too little, as this will make it difficult for the examiner to award marks. Yes, single word answers or lists are unlikely. Not impossible, it's not impossible, but it's unlikely to gain marks, as this would not normally be enough to show understanding. So that's worth remembering. We have to make a correct technical point, and we have to show that we understand it. We understand what's going on in the scenario when making our point. So we're showing understanding, not knowledge. No, single word answers and lists, they show knowledge, or they show your ability to copy and paste course materials. We're not interested in knowledge, we're interested in understanding. You have to show understanding and a connection. Notice I've underlined it 3 times. A connection with the scenario. So you have to make a point and you have to connect it with the scenario. So to summarize what all that means, you have to demonstrate understanding and you have to show a connection between your answer and the scenario. And what that means is you're going to make your point, you're going to explain your point, and you're going to back up your point, support your point with evidence from the scenario. And this is where we get something called the P principle, which we'll talk about shortly, which a lot of people misuse and overthink. But that's point, evidence, explanation. That, by the way, is not a NEBOSH technique. That's just something you all have to do day to day, the P principle. You know, if I were to ask you, comment on why climate change is a real thing, right? Non-safety topic, environmental topic. You would make a point, oh, climate change is a real thing because of this, and you would have to explain that point and then back it up with evidence. You could say, oh, the temperature trends are rising, or whatever it is you want to say, yeah? It's just a communication thing. You try asking your boss to do something without using the P principle, right? Things are really unsafe, boss. That's my point. What do I mean by unsafe? We've got we've got this happening and that happening and that happening. The risk is high. That's what I mean by unsafe. And here's my evidence. Trend of trip accidents, trend of manual handling accidents, and so on. P principle. It's just a normal communication technique to help you communicate more clearly. So in general, 1 mark is given for each technical point clearly demonstrated. So just to kind of recap that, you will get marks most of the time for things that are on the marking scheme and things that are clearly demonstrated, as in explained, supported by evidence. But in some cases and some marking schemes, you can get extra marks. Extra marks for mentioning the evidence from the scenario. You can get extra marks for mentioning relevant things from the scenario when making your point. So what it actually means is you can get 2 points in an answer. 2 marks in an answer. You make a point, that point's on a marking scheme, you get a mark. And then you support your point with something from the scenario, and you might get an extra mark. And that's really cool, isn't it? That's really cool to get extra marks. Lists without any connection to the scenario will rarely get marks. This is a list of breaches to the Health and Safety Work Act. There's 0 explanation, 0 connection to the scenario, doesn't show any understanding whatsoever. That will get 0. If we take this answer here, this is a first aid question, distance from emergency services. The scenario says this. Now notice, that might be on the marking scheme. It might be, might not be. And this might also be on the marking scheme. And that's pretty cool. So when I'm commenting on how do we decide on the suitability of first aid arrangements, I could say, well, the further we are away from the emergency services, the more first aid training, the more first aid kit we're going to need, because it's going to take longer for the emergency services to arrive. That will get a mark. And then I could just chuck in there, and the factory is 10 miles away from the closest medical center. That gets another mark. Maybe, depends on the marking scheme. So mark and mark. 2 marks for what is basically 1 answer. So I'm going to write the answer plan. Just remember where we are. Just make sure we're not going off on a tangent. We're going to try and write something that looks like this. It's a list of short answers. Something that looks a bit like that. Where do we get the information from? Well, we get the information from, depending on the question, from 3 different sources, either from your course materials or a book, the scenario, or from the internet. Not ChatGPT and not Copilot. So for this question, this is a HSG65 question. You just go onto Google and you look up HSG65 and you go and find the HSG65 document. That will be really useful when creating your answer plan. And just good to go back to the 3 amigos. You see the 3 amigos in the answer plan. Amigo number 1 was theory only. Theory comes from your course materials. Theory comes from the internet. Amigo number 2 was a mixture of theory and stuff from the scenario. So maybe the theory is helpful there, and maybe stuff from the scenario is there. But also you can get theory from the internet and guidance documents as well. So we've got a bit going on there. And then finally, we've got Amigo number 3. Amigo number 3 is kind of the odd one out. Amigo number 3, there will be no marks for theory. All of the marks will come from the scenario or be inferred from the scenario. And what we're trying to answer really is a Amigo number 3 question. So just to remember, we're trying to make points and we're trying to support points from the scenario. So here's the question. So we're trying to say, is this risk assessment, is it suitable and sufficient or not? And why? What makes us think that? I've got another rude acronym here. Remember the first rude acronym we had, which was RTFQ, read the question. Now I've got ATFQ, answer the question. Let me give you some examples of not answering this question. Because if you answer a different question to this, you will not get any marks. Because even though the answers you give are true, they're not correct as per the marking scheme. So examples which are not correct. Discussing how and why the algae removal was not safe. Nothing about the risk assessment being suitable and sufficient in there. Talking about the previous risk assessment or the previous lack of the risk assessment. This question is asking about the future algae removal work, not the previous work. Recommendations on how to make the activity safe. No, we're not interested in how to make the task safer. We're interested in whether the risk assessment is suitable and sufficient. Waffling on about cultural issues. Oh, the manager's not taking safety seriously. The manager needs to invest more in health and safety. I can't believe they haven't done a risk assessment in a business of this size. That's terrible. The maintenance manager should be fired. It's irrelevant. There's a breach of section 2.1 of the health and safety. Who cares? No one cares, because that's not what the question is asking for. So you have to read the question and then you have to answer the question. And I'm stating the obvious here, but this is why you fail, because you don't read the question, you don't answer the question. And just to go back to the poll that we did earlier, we started this call with a poll. You were struggling with understanding the questions and you were struggling with answering the questions. Right, so I'm helping you with this. Now let's start to pull together an answer. I think it's high time we get to an answer now. So let me bring up an answer on the screen. What have I got? I've got something here that I've drafted. I'll drag that across. Back, here we are. This is what I've written. I have written stuff like this. I've said the risk assessment process has to have proper check, has to carry out a proper check. I've written it really badly, by the way, just short notes. Well, what have they done in terms of a proper check? Well, they've spoken to people. But there's no mention of a visit to the pathways. It's all done in a meeting. There's no reference in here about visiting the pathways. It should say they went to the pathways to have a look. They put their feet on the pathway just to see how slippery it was. But there is a positive. They did examine the boots. They did a proper check. They looked at the boots, but there's a negative there. It was a maintenance worker who raised the issue. They failed to check other sources of information like accident records, safety data sheets. They failed to check slip resistance data from the boot supplier. And why do you think, why does that matter? Well, let's just go to our study book. If you go to the study book, it tells you about, and your course materials as well, you know, your course materials will say this. It talks here about how to identify hazards, and it talks about the sources of information that you should use. And they obviously haven't done that. A proper check will look at all kinds of sources of information, and they've not done it. A suitable and sufficient risk assessment should ask who might be affected. Well, they've asked about the maintenance workers, they've asked about the other staff, they've not asked about contractors. Have they addressed the significant risks? Well, they've addressed some risks, haven't they? They've addressed the slips, they've addressed the lone working, and that's a positive. Those are the obvious significant risks because, you know, let's face it, it's like there was a whole accident here. It was a slip accident made worse by a lone working issue. And so they've dealt with those. They've ignored other risks. They've ignored the risk of slips by customers and staff. That doesn't get a mention. They've ignored the pressure washer. It's electrical. It's got pressure. There's flying debris. You can hit people in the face with it. That's a risk. There's a use of chemicals, the biocides. That's not been mentioned at all. That's not been mentioned despite the fact that this poor maintenance worker got a rash on his back and legs because he was lying in the biocide chemicals after he slipped. So that's just been completely ignored. Have they introduced reasonable precautions? Have they reduced the risk to a low level? Well, they've required the use of boots. They've required the use of a comms device. They have agreed. There's also, I've forgotten one in here. There's training for the maintenance manager, maintenance supervisor, in how to manage, what was it, slips, I think it was. It mentions it up here somewhere. You benefit from specific training managing risks to wet, slippery door areas. And then later it says, you draft a risk assessment that includes these additional controls. So these additional controls are included on that. So that's a positive. It included that. The team has agreed that these measures will reduce the risk, and that's a positive. However, there are some negatives. No controls to protect visitors or other staff. There are no barriers, for example. It hasn't fixed the first aid arrangements. And there's no mention of the hierarchy of controls here. Like a good risk assessment is going to use the hierarchy of controls. Where's the drainage? Where's the anti-slip measures? Have we got matting on the floor? Have we got gritting of the floor? Have we got changing the replacement of the paving stones for something less slippery? None of that's been mentioned. Have they involved people? Yes, they've involved the workers, but they've not involved the contractor. Whoops. Is it proportionate to the risk and the level of detail? Well, actually, the 5 steps method is proportionate for what is a fairly non-technical task. It's a medium risk general maintenance task. 5 steps approach is absolutely fine. But we've got this biocide chemical, which is potentially harmful, and that would benefit from a GOSH assessment. There might also be a slip testing, possibly as well, slip testing on paving stones. It might benefit from additional slip testing to see what's going on there. Have they focused on all of the foreseeable risks and significant risks? Well, I'm starting to repeat myself a little bit here. Someone earlier asked, how many marks can you get from saying the same thing? Just 1. Notice that I've kind of said that there, and I've also said it, where else did I say it? Here. So I'm probably not going to get marks for those later points. That's an answer plan. And someone asked me earlier about structure. How do I, like, what's the first thing that I'm going to say? Well, it depends on the question, obviously. But if you look at the course materials, if you look at HSG 65, it said proper check. Well, let's start there. Suitable and sufficient risk assessment is one where a proper check is made. They didn't do a proper check because proper check would visit the work area, and they would look at data sheets. They would look at they would get data on the shoes and the boots to see how slip resistant they are, because they don't seem to be very slippery. So it's not good there, but there are some positives. It's not all bad. They did involve the whole team, and they they asked the supervisor, who's highly experienced, and so on. So you can mention those things. And then it says, did they ask who was affected? Say, well, yeah, they've obviously asked about the maintenance workers. They know the maintenance workers are affected, but it's not very good, because we have customers who are affected too, and they haven't been considered at all in this process. So they haven't asked, how do we protect the visitors and the customers or the contractor? So you just work your way down it. You've got these 5 or 6 criteria, and just make a series of comments on each one. Let me take some quick questions. Someone asks, can you start multiple times with the risk assessment is not suitable because of? Yeah. You can repeat if you want to use the risk assessment is not suitable and sufficient because, the risk assessment is not suitable and sufficient because, yes, you can do that. Do you have to? No. No, it doesn't. You don't have to repeat yourself. It depends on how eloquent you are. It depends on how good of a communicator you are. A good communicator is not going to repeat the same sentence every time. But if that's what you need to do to feel comfortable and to get your answer down, you repeat yourself as much as you like. You will not get any extra marks for repeating yourself. The key thing is that your point is correct and makes sense to the examiner, and that you've explained it well enough. Let's have a look at a couple of questions in the QA. Someone's asking, slightly off topic, but it's still related to NEBOSH. Thank you. In your experience, or based on what you've heard from your students, Does getting a distinction, credit, or just a pass make any difference in job competitiveness? In my experience, it doesn't make any difference whatsoever whether you get a pass, credit, or distinction. No one cares. Very few people get a distinction, like 5% of students probably get it. That's my guess. That's not a statistic. My guess is, I mean, I usually get one distinction in every cohort. That's it, one person out of however many sit it. 10 to 30 people usually sit it. So one distinction. Credits, yeah, I might get maybe 5 credits or so. So still a minority. No one cares. I'll tell you a little, very quick story. So now we're kind of running a little bit behind, but I'll stay to the end. It's fine for me. I got 2 best candidate awards. Like out of 1,000 people who did the NEBOSH diploma in 2008, I got the best mark on Unit B. I got 91%, I think it was, 91% on Unit B, which was my weakest subject. Interesting story, that one. And I got the best mark overall. So taking units A, B, C, and D, added them all together, I got the highest mark, which I think was like 73 or 74. I was very, very close to not winning it. Someone else was like 1 mark behind or something. Anyway, I got 2 best candidate awards, which is super rare. Very few people have done that. I thought I was amazing. I thought I was going to walk into a vice president of safety job. No one cared. No one cared. Just my ego. That was the only thing that cared. What matters was my experience, my competence, my ability to actually make a difference in real life. Got another question coming in about employment. I'll cover that at the end if that's okay. I will cover that question that's been asked, but I will stick to the topic right now because I know that's what you're here for. So back to the presentation. Now that you've seen an answer plan, and just where am I in my slides? Am I in the right place in my slides? Yes, I am. What I want to do now is take that answer plan and write out full answers. And so I'm going to take something that looks a bit like this. That's an example of a plan to a completely different question. And I'm going to turn it into this. And so notice it's a bit longer straight away, obviously, because I've only got short answers on one side and I've got fully explained answers on the other side. So that's what a good answer looks like. To most questions, just bear that in mind, everyone, that's what a good answer looks like. Most questions, most of your answers should look like this. Very rarely will it look different to that. And what can we say? What's good about that? Well, quite a few things. I'll point them out in a moment. But first, let's talk about this P principle. Point, evidence, explanation. We can use the P principle to help turn our list into full answers. Now here we've basically got points, and we might also have some evidence as well. Remember what I said earlier. If I just go back to this slide here, I said we're making points and we're writing down the relevant information. So we're already mostly there, aren't we? We've got points and information. But now we want a bit of explanation as well and make it a coherent answer. Here are the exam instructions again. Just remember that we're looking to clearly demonstrate things. And what we said was we get a mark for the points, provided they're correct and provided they're explained and linked to the scenario. And you might get some extra points for your evidence along the way. So let me just delete that red line from the screen so we don't need that anymore. So here's an answer to a random question. Can you see it's 4 lines? There's my point. The OM did not specifically check the contractor, had previous experience of working with the warehouse conveyors. There's a bit of evidence or relevant information. This is in the scenario. This is my relevant information in the scenario to support what I just said above. The OM seemed to believe the contractor when they confidently said they could do it. And here's a little bit of an explanation. Had the contractor had similar experience, they might have fitted the fan properly. That is a beautiful P principle answer. And that will get 1 mark or maybe 2, depending on the marking scheme. You might get 1 mark for the points and you might get 1 mark for that evidence there if that's on the marking scheme. But to be clear though, that is not the only way you can get marks. And to be absolutely clear, you do not have to use the P principle. What if I told you you don't have to use the P principle? You don't have to. It's just a technique to help you. That's all it is. Don't go thinking that you have to follow that structure to get marks. You don't. You don't have to do it. It's just to help you. Examiners are not ticking boxes. They're not thinking, right, have we got a point? Yes, we've got a point there. Have we got the evidence? Yes, we've got the evidence there. Right. Have we got the explanation? Yes, brilliant. We have got point, evidence, and explanation. I can now give you 1 mark. Brilliant. That's not what they're doing. They're not doing that. What they're looking for is for you to make the point. Is the point correct? Is it on the marking scheme? Yes. Have you clearly demonstrated it in your explanation? And is your answer as a whole connected to the scenario? Don't go overthinking the P principle and thinking you have to use some kind of magical structure. There is no magical structure to your answers. There's no magical structure to get you marks. There are just ways of presenting your answers. Remember the basic rules. Your points have got to be correct. You've got to demonstrate them. And most of the time, you've got to connect it to the scenario in some way. Maybe not every point has to be connected to the scenario, but your answer as a whole, if the question says use the scenario, then your answer as a whole should be drawing from the scenario to support things. So I hope you found that useful. Now let's carry on. I do get some rather strange questions on stuff like this. People will ask me things like, can I use the same evidence twice? Will I lose marks if I use the same evidence twice? I'm like, just stop it, will you? Just stop it. You are now overthinking the P principle. Just stop overthinking it and just answer the question. Just answer the damn question, will you? Because NEBOSH exams are not jumping through hoops of fire. It's not a NEBOSH exam. It says here in the NEBOSH instructions, you're looking for a connection with the scenario. So here are some broad points here. You do not need to link every single point you make to the scenario. Some points you make are pure theory. Pure theory. You can't link a purely theoretical point to the scenario when there's nothing in the scenario relating to the point you're trying to make. So I see people trying to force things. They try and force. They'll say, all right, I need evidence from the scenario for every single thing. I'm like, no, you don't. No, you don't. You need a mixture. Sometimes it's a theoretical point. Don't try and force evidence from the scenario. It doesn't make sense. But sometimes there is something in the scenario which supports your point, and those you should put together. Yes. Yeah, so, use brain, use common sense. There's no magic to this. Just answer the question. So you don't have to link every point to the scenario. Your answer as a whole should be connected to the scenario if the question asks for it. Some points don't connect easily. Don't force it. Only mention the relevant information where applicable. And mention it where it is applicable, because it could be worth a mark, but only if the question asks for it. So there are marks for relevant information, but the key word there is relevant information. The key word is relevant. You'll only get marks for relevant information if it's on the marking scheme. So basically, just answer the question. That would be great. And just remember the P principle. It's just a communication tool. It's not mandatory. Not mandatory in the slightest. Just answer the question. So we're going to make points, explain the points, and we're going to support the answers with information. And we're going to try and turn that into that. Here's the answer plan. That's what it's written out in full. Notice some things here. 2 to 3 lines per point made. Can you see it? 2 lines, 2 lines, 2 lines, 3 lines, 3 lines, 2, 2, 3, 2, 2, 3, 2, 1. Right? So there's the occasional exception. That's okay. But notice kind of the length as a broad rule of thumb. And again, please don't misunderstand me. No examiner is counting the lines. They're not saying, oh, they've only written 1 line, can't give a mark for that. No. You can get points in 1 line. If you're really good with English and you can make your point really clearly, and it's technically correct, tick, you'll get a mark in 1 line, it's fine. But for you to, most people will need 2 lines to make their point, explain their point, and maybe use a little bit of evidence from the scenario. That's going to need about 2 lines, maybe 3. Me, I talk too much. For me, I'll be saying 3. But that's just me, because I just talk too much. That's my that's my problem. So 2 to 3 lines. Bullet pointed paragraphs. Bullet pointed paragraphs are really cool because you can instantly see where you haven't written enough. You can instantly see that's only 1 line. And that's useful. So at a glance, you can see if you've not written enough. And we have numbered the bullet points as well. Why do we number them? So we can count them. Because if this is a 10-mark question, you don't want to be counting bullet points. That's going to take time. Just number your bullet points so you can say, right, I've got 14 answers, 10-mark question. That is enough. I can move on now. Please remember, some questions do not require full explanations. Some questions do not require any reference to the scenario. And so those answers might be shorter. Sometimes the answers will look more like your answer plan. Sometimes your answer will look like that if it's just asking for a basic list without any reference to the scenario. So it doesn't have to look like a long piece of work. Anyway, someone earlier asked me about the word count. If I do this well, if I write 2 to 3 lines and I'm writing more answers than there are marks available, aren't I going to bust my word count? Well, to be clear, this is not a NEBOSH examiner. NEBOSH examiners are not counting your word count. If you remember Sesame Street, this puppet counts things. NEBOSH examiners are not counting anything. There are myths and rumors out there of examiners will stop marking when you get to 3,300 words. And I'm like, who made that up? That's never been a rule. Ever. 3,300 words. Yes, it does mention 3,300 words, but no one's counting your words and making sure you are staying under that. So let's take a look at what it says. Now, there is a guidance document. There is a guidance document which scares some people if you find it. And this is a guidance document, and it is a little bit confusing, this, because it says your overall word count must be. Now, it's worth noting that this guidance document is not for the general certificate. It is for all digital assessments, all of them, and it says it will specify a word count. Now, some assessments might have a very strict word count, but the general certificate does not. So it says must there, and it says must be no more than 10%, and that's where people get this 3,300 word count from. But then later it says the recommended word count, recommended. So it's a recommendation. It's a recommendation. And the recommendation is there for a good reason, because they don't want you to just write all kinds of stupid nonsense. They want you to focus on the subject. They want you to avoid going off into strange places. So the word count is there for a reason, and you shouldn't completely ignore it. Many course providers are telling people not to go over 3,300 words, and many course providers have a lower pass rate than we do. Because here's what your exam paper says. Your exam paper says this. It uses the word you are not expected to. It doesn't say you must not. It says you are not expected to. Read that carefully, like a NEBOSH question, and you will soon understand that that means, it implies that your word count of 3,000 words can be exceeded. It can. It's just an expectation. They're basically saying you can pass in about 3,000 words if your answers are correct, and if you're good at the English language and don't talk too much. You can do it. Here at Compassa, we've got an 89% pass rate, and I challenge you to find another e-learning provider with a higher pass rate. If you find one, please let me know. It's interesting though, because you won't find other course providers advertising their pass rates like we do. They just don't. I think Astutis do kind of put a first-time pass rate on some of those, but they don't make the distinction between classroom and e-learning. So it's hard to say exactly how they calculate that. But I know no other course provider who advertises pass rates like we do, and I do wonder why. And I think, well, maybe because Maybe because they're not very proud of them. Simple as that, really. 89%. And that's the sort of word count I'm seeing. Most of our students have word counts between 5,000 to 6,000. That's the pass rate. Now, does that mean you can just write anything you like? No, don't go writing anything you like. Only write what you think will get marks or should get marks. I'm not giving you permission to write a lot of nonsense here. Stick to the point. Don't waste time. Don't waste the examiner's time either. Right? But, you know, like you can go over it, and perhaps you should go over it if you think that's going to help you get the marks. Right. Let me move on to the last point. I know we've got some questions backing up. I will take questions. I'm going to finish the questions at the very end, so hang by for that. This is where we are. We've got one final. Where is it? Where's my? Right, there we are. Hopefully you can see that on screen. This is where we are. Answer in full. We haven't answered in full yet. We've done the answer plan, but we haven't answered in full yet. So let me show you something that I prepared earlier. Where is it? Full answer. There we are. Let me drag this across. Hopefully that's on the screen. If not, send me a quick chat. I've actually started with a little bit of an introduction. I don't normally put an introduction in, but I just wanted to kind of set out. This is what HSG 65 says on the definition of suitable and sufficient. I've typed that out in my own words. I'm not sure that's going to get a mark, but it might get 1 mark for me recognizing kind of what suitable and sufficient means. It might get 1. I'm going to give my opinion. Overall, it was not suitable and sufficient. But I don't think I'm going to get a mark for that. I'm going to get a mark for the detail. Now, to help me structure it, I've kind of just followed the same structure that I had earlier in my answer plan. Yeah, it's the same structure. What I've basically just done, I've just taken my answer plan, which had a really short answer, and I've just written it out in full. The risk assessment was done in collaboration with the GM, the supervisor, who's experienced, and several of the maintenance workers. They were asked for their opinions on how to manage the risk of this task. A proper check would include a visit to the area. There's no mention of a visit to the pathways, which shows a proper check was not made. They did examine the existing boots to see how slippy they are, although it was the maintenance worker who raised the issue. It wasn't raised by the HSM or the GM. They failed to check other sources of information, such as accident records, safety data sheets, and the slip resistance from the boot supplier. I could add a bit more there. This could have revealed other hazards and risks. Their only source of information are the workers. Ask who might be affected. Well, it didn't really ask who is affected. It mainly focused on those doing the task. No consideration of others who might be affected, those who might walk on the pathway during treatment, including staff or visitors. A possible contractor is mentioned who might do the work for them, but they are not considered during the risk assessment. Now, someone earlier was asking, and this is a very common thing that people do, they think they have to write an introduction to every point. The risk assessment is not suitable and sufficient because they think they have to write, they think, oh, I'm not going to get the mark unless I write that in. I'm like, no, come on. You can do it if you want. It's fine. You're not going to lose any marks, but it's not necessary. You don't have to write these silly introductions. And it is just a silly introduction. Another one could be they did not involve the workers, or their reps. You might think, oh, I have to write that at the start of every sentence, because if I don't write it at the start of every sentence, I'm not going to get the mark. Like, no. It's very clear, isn't it? As long as the examiner knows what you're doing and knows that you're expressing a comment on this particular criteria, which, by the way, we mentioned it up here. Workers, their reps will be involved. So that's what we say. This is one of the criteria. Now let me comment on that criteria. I'm commenting there. And notice I've made about 23 different answers there. Not all of them are going to get marks, because I think I've already mentioned those. So I don't think that's going to get a mark. I don't think this is going to get a mark. I think I'm starting to repeat myself at this point. But I've got 21 things that I've said for a 12-mark question. And so that's what a good answer would look like. Now, is that the marking scheme? No. Is that going to get full marks? Probably, or very close to it. Very close to it. So that's how you pull together an answer to a question. You read it super carefully and notice how much time did we spend on step 5? We spent a long time on step 5 because you pass or fail here. We then went for the scenario, having studied the topic. We then wrote an answer plan, and we did that pretty quickly in the end. And once your answer plan is written out, all I had to do was just write slightly longer answers and just tie it all together into something that looks a bit more professional, something which clearly demonstrates my understanding and just ties all my points and information together. Now at this point, you'll notice I'm going to go back to step 3, choose the easiest question, and we're just going to go round and round in circles for quite a bit. And we're not finished yet, are we? We've got to do it all over again. Playing a big game of whack-a-mole. And I'm going to make my way from the easiest to the second easiest to the third easiest, all the way to the hardest question, which I leave until last. And one of the reasons why I leave the hardest question to last is because that's the question which I'm dreading. It's the question which I think I'm not going to do very well on. I'm going to get 2 marks out of 10. I haven't got a clue what I'm going to do with that one. And I'm hoping that by the time I get there, I've done so well in my other answers. I'm looking at my answer sheet and I'm thinking, it's not perfect, but I think I've passed. I think based on what I've done, I think that's good enough to pass. That looks a lot like what Will did in the webinar. That must be 45. Let me see, can I get an extra 2 or 3 marks out of question 10? Yeah, and so you're less stressed at that point because you think, oh, I only need an extra few. Let me just do my best with this. So you leave it to last. Another reason why you leave it to last as well is because sometimes after you've answered all the other questions, you may have thought of other things you could say in that hard question. It may have jogged your memory. You may have stumbled across something in the book or your course materials which made you realize, that's what that question's about. So leave the hard ones to the end. You can answer them in any order, absolutely any order. So back to the presentation. I hope, where are we? Am I showing my screen or not? I am showing my screen. What am I sharing? There, I'm showing the screen. So step 10, don't submit. Go to sleep. Step 11, Groundhog Day. You're going to wake up and look at it again. Try and improve your answers. Fill in the final details on the answer sheet, name, number, word count, reference sources, even though they don't penalize you for the word count. You can probably even leave the references blank and you won't be penalized, but you should still do this properly and fill it in. That, by the way, is going to be your defense if you get accused of cheating or malpractice. Because if you copy some information from a website and you don't reference it in the reference box at the end, they may say, listen, you've tried to pass it off as your own work. So fill that in. It's in your own interest to fill all of that in. Then you're going to submit your exam answer sheet before the deadline. So the deadline's pretty strict. Get it in before the deadline, and don't wait until exactly 11 o'clock, by the way. Log in, 10-15 minutes before. Otherwise, what happens if your internet crashes? What happens if the website crashes? Right? Just try and get it in, and then relax. Am I sharing my screen? I've got no idea anymore if I'm sharing my screen. So I'm going to stop the share, just start again. Right, I've got a really important point. This happened to one of my students. They didn't save. Save. In fact, if you have auto-save on your Microsoft Word document, I recommend you turn on the auto-save. Save regularly, because I had one student, they nearly finished their exam and they got a blue screen of death. They lost everything. They had to redo it all in a short space of time. They submitted, they failed because they didn't have time to do it. So make sure you're safe. All right, and then final piece of advice is stick to the plan. You are going to hit a difficult question. Please just resign yourselves to this reality. There are going to be some questions, at least one, maybe 2 or 3, which you do not like. Accept it and resign yourself to trying your best anyway. Just follow the plan. You don't like the question? Read it carefully, word for word, and dissect it. Go to your course materials, look up the topic if you need to. then if it's a scenario question, obviously, which most are, go through the scenario, go through your course materials, try and look for things in the scenario which are going to help you answer. Look for things in your course materials which are going to help you answer. Then write an answer plan using your course materials and the scenario, maybe the internet as well. Write your answer plan till you've got like, 10, 15, 20 things, however many you need. And then write a full answer using the P principle if you think that's a useful strategy. But just remember, it's not a mandatory strategy. Key thing is you explain those points sufficiently, so you show some understanding, no one-word answers, no lists, and try and link them to the scenario as much as wherever relevant. Not as much as possible, wherever it is relevant and applicable to do so. So just follow that plan, and you should do absolutely fine, provided that you can find the right points, provided that you do understand it. So where can I get more help? Because this is Arnold in Predator, and he needs a bit more help. Where can I get more help? Well, as I said earlier, you've got tons of help. You've got loads of free resources. NEBOSH guidance, you've got a PDF that will be with you tomorrow, probably tomorrow night. There's the PDF there. Have a look through that if you want. You've got this webinar, you can watch it again. You've got our YouTube channel. Just go onto YouTube, type in NEBOSH, loads of stuff. Have a good look at that. And if you did want to buy our study book, it's no problem. I'll just take you to the website right here. If you just go onto the NEBOSH part of the menu and just go, no, that's the exam technique guide. No, that's what you're getting for free. Don't buy that. You're getting that for free tomorrow. This one here, that's a bundle of 2 different books. Let's say you just want NG1, you've got it there, NG1 study book, and there's an IG1 study book there as well. Very, very thorough documents designed to help you pass. They're designed with success in mind. So you've got all that to help you. There's prep courses, rescue packages. If you want my personal tutor support, you probably won't need that, but I think you've had enough now. 89% is the result. So at this point, I'm going to take some questions. Feel free to type your questions into the chat or into the Q&A bit. If you don't want to hang around for questions, feel free to go. You're not required to stay. I've got a question here, which I've answered this already. Will I be penalized if I have grammar? Oh, no, hang on. No. All right, no, I haven't answered this. This is different. Will I be penalized if I have grammar on my computer which corrects grammatical errors? Right, so basic spell check on Microsoft Word, you're probably fine. Basic spell check which corrects your grammatical errors, probably fine. But be careful, there is something called Grammarly. Grammarly is a website, and it's also like a plugin you can install on Microsoft Word and your email and stuff like that. Grammarly, it started out as just a spell checker, but now it's using artificial intelligence to help you rewrite your answers. Grammarly is probably going to fall foul of NEBOSH's malpractice policy, because even though it just takes the meaning of what you said and rewrites it, so it's kind of what you said but rewritten, it's still not completely your work, is it? Because it's taken a basic point that you made and it's made it more eloquent. It's used different words. It's used a different structure. I would caution you against using things like Grammarly or anything that uses AI to rewrite your answers. I will give you a little bit of a tip here, actually. This is something that I kind of became aware of. I didn't become aware of it, but I thought to show it to a student the other night, and they found it super useful. What happens if you're the type of person who just struggles to write things down? I get a lot of students who say, I kind of know what I want to say, I just can't get it on paper. I just can't get it into the Word document. It's like I can't type it. Right, that is just a mental block that you have. You can overcome it, but here's a little tip to make it nice and easy for you. Let me show you this, and this is allowed, by the way. If I share my share this, why don't you try the dictate function on Microsoft Word? So let me just go onto a brand new page. If you know the answer, if you know what you want to say, why don't you just click on dictate up here in Microsoft Word, and now try dictating it. As you can see, it doesn't spell things perfectly correctly. But if I wanted to talk about HSG65, which says that a proper check has to be done, I don't think a proper check has been done, because they basically just sat in a meeting and talked about the risk assessment. And that doesn't sound very thorough to me. A proper risk assessment would include a physical check on the pathways. They should have visited the work area where the maintenance was being carried out. They should also have checked the accident records. They should have checked the slipperiness of the boots, but they didn't. In fact, it was a maintenance operative who raised the issue of the boots. Stop. Now, you could just submit that as your answer, you know? You could just dictate the whole thing and submit it as your answer. It is not pretty. It's not well structured. It's not even grammatically correct. There isn't a single full stop in there. But you know what? The examiner is going to read it. And the examiner is going to mark it, because that's what examiners do. And if you wanted, at the very start of your paper, if you wanted to say something like, "Dear examiner, I'm really sorry that this is not a pretty exam paper. I really struggle to write down answers, so I'm using a dictation function on my computer to type what I say. Please forgive the lack of full stops." I don't think any examiner in their right mind is going to penalize you in the slightest for what you've done. I would prefer you write that than write nothing at all. I hope you found that useful. The dictation function. And of course, you can tidy that up after if you want. If you want to break that up into paragraphs, add some full stops, do a spell check on it, grammar check, you go right ahead. Just don't use any AI. All right, let me go back to the questions. So I've answered that one. Grammarly, that's a no-no. Is employment in health and safety rewarding, and is it stressful? Rewarding, yes, it's a pretty well-paid job. Is it stressful? It can be. It depends on the employer. I would say all managerial jobs tend to be a bit stressful. This is because that's just the nature of management. Is this the most stressful management job? No. The most stressful management jobs are going to be the productive managers, what I call the managers of the direct labor type managers, the operations managers, the production managers, the logistics managers, you know, the real managers, not the health and safety managers, not the HR managers, not the quality managers. Yeah, it's the real managers who get mostly stressed. So let's put it into perspective. I did a secondment where I moved into production management. That was way harder than health and safety. I got out of that as soon as I could. It's stressful in companies where there is resistance to health and safety and resistance to change, where you've got a negative manager, a negative director. So one of the places where I had the greatest problems, I won't name the company, but it was a manufacturer, big manufacturer based in Hull or near Hull. And this is going back, you know, if you find out who this is, just remember we're going back to 2008, 2007, 2008 time. They didn't do health and safety, they did production. And the only reason I was there is because it saved them money on their insurance premium. That's all. So basically they got back £40,000 from their insurer for employing me, and they paid me 25,000. So yeah, that's the level of support that I got. Very, very hard place to work, a lot of bullying. That was stressful, indeed. But you know what? I did 2.5 years there. I didn't do long, but that was my first, what I would call my first proper health and safety job. The first one that was full-time, the first one that was in a manufacturing technical industry. I survived 2.5 years and survived 5 rounds of redundancy, actually. They tried to get rid of me quite a bit, but failed. But in the end, it was the 5th round I wasn't going to survive. I did 2.5 years. Now I had 2.5 years on my CV. 2.5 years on your CV is a lot better than 0 years on your CV. So at that point, it's like I had quite a bit of experience. I'd also passed my NEBOSH diploma. So you know, I was flying after that. So I don't regret that stressful experience for a second. And I still use that experience a lot in my training when teaching people how to handle difficult managers. So was that stressful? Yes. I went and worked somewhere else. Very different type of employer, very low risk, not very pro health and safety, but very low risk. No one really cared about health and safety. There were no major health and safety concerns. All the concerns were fairly minor. That was stressful in a different way. That was stressful because I just didn't really know what to do with the place. There wasn't a lot of support there, and it wasn't like anyone was about to die because it was call centers, very minor stuff, health conditions, basically computers and stress, a few slips and trips, minor stuff. I was stressed there because I just didn't see why I was really there. So that was a bit of a problem. But is it rewarding? Yes. Like, it's rewarding in a sense that you can see a physical difference. You can see accident trends go down. It's rewarding in the sense that you know that people are not being injured or made unhealthy thanks to you. Are you saving lives? No, let's not get too dramatic about it. You're not saving a life, but you are preventing harm, no doubt about it. You are preventing maybe deaths. So in a way, you are kind of saving a life, but don't get too dramatic about it. So very rewarding, financially quite rewarding as well. And the cool thing with safety, I'll finish with this one last point and I'll take another question. What I really like about safety is that it covers a lot of different topics. You've got technical stuff like mechanics and electricity and radiation, and then you've got safety and health, and there's well-being, and there's mental health and psychology and management and leadership styles and culture. And you've got all the bureaucratic stuff, you know, what makes a good health and safety management system. It's like some of it you will hate, but some of it will really rock your boat and you will absolutely love. Me, I hate ISO 45001. Tedious, awful thing. Wouldn't touch it with a barge pole. But I love culture. I love leadership. I love winning people over. And then fire. I just don't know why. I've always loved the topic fire. And a bit of manual handling too. It's just, there's something in there that you will love. Next question, kindly give some time management tips to do study and reading, and normally how long it takes to complete the certificate. Well, NEBOSH say that it takes about 100 hours of study plus your assessment. So it's about 108 hours, 110 hours. So if you were to do it in a classroom, I don't recommend doing it in a classroom. I know I've vested interests. We're an e-learning provider. You should do it with me. But if you were to do it in a classroom, it would take 2 weeks. And even I can't make it that interesting in a classroom. So it's 2 solid weeks plus an extra 20 hours of personal study. That's 100 hours. Now, e-learning, the beauty of e-learning is that you can take longer if you need to. So not everyone's clever enough or fast enough to take it all in a classroom course. And there's a timetable, and the tutor has to stick to the timetable. So you can take a bit longer if you do e-learning, or if you're super clever, you can get through it faster. It's flexible. 100 hours is about right. How long will it take you to do it e-learning wise? 3 to 6 months, usually. You can do it quicker, of course. I've got some students, though, have been taking a year to do it because, you know, problems at home, busy at work, big project, things get in the way sometimes. And again, that's the beauty of e-learning. You can put it off and come back to it later. But 3 to 6 months. If you study 4 hours a week, 6 months. 4 hours a week is 6 months. If you study 8 hours a week, it takes about 3 months. Can I be easily employed with IGC? Someone asks. Can I be easily employed? Well, that depends. It depends on... So IGC is the International General Certificate, so I assume you are not in the UK. It depends on which country you are in and whether it is whether IGC is in demand in your industry and in your country. If you're in Australia, no. Australia doesn't recognize IGC. If you're in America, no. Very few employers in America recognize IGC. If you're in India, yeah. Qatar, Abu Dhabi, United Arab Emirates, Nigeria, those kinds of places. So there's a whole part of Africa, South Africa, the Middle East, parts of Asia, Very, very high demand, very well recognized. And if your industry recognizes it, yes. The best way to know is go have a look at the job adverts. And if the job adverts are asking for NEBOSH IGC, yeah, okay. But you might need experience. You probably will need some kind of experience which is relevant to the role you're looking for. Unless it's just a basic role where they're looking to take on a complete beginner. And those roles do exist. Someone says, not a real question, just wanted to say thank you for giving up your time to the webinar. Hey, you're absolutely very, very welcome. Hope you go smash it. And I think we're out of questions. Let me have a quick look. Oh no, I might have some more in here in the chat. Should fine and Kinney not be in a risk assessment? I've got no idea what that is. Should fine and Kinney not be in a risk assessment? I've got no idea what that is. Is that in a... Is that like is that research or something you're quoting? No, let me just Google that. Fine and Kinney. Fine and Kinney method. All right. No, I don't even know that. All right. Okay. US Navy. Right. No, Fine and Kinney. This question is asking about the it's asking about the definite, suitable and sufficient according to HSG 65. HSG 65 does not make any reference to a specific methodology. It doesn't say Fine and Kinney. It doesn't say risk matrices. It doesn't say 5 steps to risk assessment either. It doesn't say any of that. All right, so this particular question was not asking for Fines and Kinney method. Now, Fines and Kinney probably relates to risk ratings. I'm just having a quick look at it. It's basically a scoring system. Yeah, you can get questions on scoring systems. They don't call it Fine and Kinney because that's not in the syllabus. Fine. So there's straight away, it's Fine and Kinney. It's not on the syllabus, so you're not going to get a question on that. But risk matrices are on the syllabus, and you can get questions on those and how those work. But you won't get any marks for Fine and Kinney. That's far too clever. Moving on. Lots of thank yous. You're very welcome for thank yous. Will you provide a copy of your answers created to the example question? No, I won't. No, I won't. If you want to have a look at the answers, look at the video, screenshot them if you like. Do not plagiarize my answers on your exam question. Different scenario, different answer. But you can screenshot it and see what a good answer looks like. I can't find the list of NG1 guidance documents and ACOPs in my account. Can you show where to find it? Right, so I don't know what account you're talking about there. Maybe you're a Compassa student, maybe you're not a Compassa student. Let me just show you where to find guidance documents. So we're going to go onto Google. Right, so here's Google. I'm just going to type in HSG, or actually HSE publications. Enter, and I'm looking for the full catalog. Now there's a catalog there. Now they've moved things around, which makes it a little bit harder for me to find things. Let's have a look at this. This one here. Yeah, okay, you can find some in there. This is quite useful because it's by topic. So search for HSC publications. You'll find it by topic. That's pretty cool. That's not really what I wanted though. No. Full catalog, right? Okay, this one here, full catalog, found it there. So there's the link. This is useful because this gives me ACOPs, legal reference L. These are ACOPs. By the way, you do not need any ACOPs for your NG1 exam. ACOPs are usually hazard related. They're useful for NG2 for the project. You've got HSG in here, and funnily enough, you'll find HSG 65, which we were talking about today. So hopefully you found that useful. Let's take more questions. Oh, yes, you are a Compassa student. Well, just drop me an email to the tutor email. Drop me an email to the tutor email, and I'll show you how to find that stuff there. Questions are best asked directly to the tutor email. Very informative, ready to face the exam next week. Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you, good information. Thank you. How do I get in touch with you for business opportunities? I'm in Uganda. It's very simple. You drop me an email. I'm going to put my email address in there. There you go. Emails in the chat. Drop me an email. I can't guarantee that I'll answer all emails. So if you flood me with questions and stuff like that, there's every chance I'll just delegate it to somebody else. So I can't answer all emails. I run a business, and this business is now getting big. We have over 1,000 NGC students on our course. So we've gone from tiny provider to a provider that's actually quite significant in the marketplace. So which is a wonderful thing, but it means there are restrictions on my time. Right. Any more? Oh my goodness, loads of questions come in. Someone says IGC is recommended in Saudi Arabia. Yes, very much so. That is true. Time management advice. I've given loads of that already. Watch the video again. Gloria from Uganda. How do I stay committed to doing the IGC study time, especially when doing it online? Okay, right. How do you... How do I not procrastinate? How do I not procrastinate? First of all, you need a goal. So you need a reason why you're doing the course. For me, I'll give you the reasons why I was doing the course. First of all, I wanted a career. That's why I did my NGC. I wanted a career. But after that, I wanted my diploma. How do I stay motivated? Because it was really hard. Well, two reasons. Firstly, I wanted the career and I wanted the career progression. But for me, there was something really important for me. My wife was not British. My wife was from a different country. I won't say where she's from. But she's from a different country, and she wasn't allowed to emigrate to the UK easily. She was in the UK on a kind of a temporary type visa, but I needed to get a spouse visa. And to get a spouse visa, I needed to show that I had good earnings, that I had a place to live and had lots of savings. And to do all that, I needed to be earning good money. I needed a good job, didn't I? Yeah. I needed the NEBOSH diploma in order to live with my wife, basically. So that was my motivation. Right? It was like, do we split up, or do I go live with you in the other country where I don't speak the language and where opportunities are not as good? So I had great motivation. You need to think about what's motivating you. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, just to finish that, there are two types of motivation. You can be motivated towards a goal, and you can be motivated away from something that you're scared of. Me, I was scared of losing my wife. But I was also motivated towards living with her permanently, and motivated towards money and the career opportunities and all of that. So there's two types of motivation. Like, think, if I don't get this, what's going to happen to me? If I fail, what's going to happen to me if I do get this, if I succeed? Two types of motivation. The second thing is just get a diary, get a calendar, and then block out time in the diary or calendar. Like, just block out chunks of it and just say, these days at these times are my study hours, and those are precious to me, and carve them out. Now, you have to have some conversations with people. Maybe your employer, if you're lucky, your employer will give you some time, maybe 2 hours on a Friday or Thursday or something. Maybe you have a partner, a wife, a husband, who will support you with the children, perhaps. Me, when I was studying, as I said, we didn't have children at the time, but I had the support of my wife-to-be. She knew that there were certain times where I was going to study, and she didn't bother me with anything. And even now when I'm working, and like tonight, she said to me, don't worry about the children tonight. I will do everything with the children tonight. You go do your webinar. Come back anytime you like. It's fine. I have her support. Get the support of your family and friends around you whose support you need in order to get through this. And then it's useful to get someone that you are accountable to, someone that you report to. So maybe you agree with your boss. You agree that you will pass this course by July, and you're in trouble if you don't. Maybe you agree it with your tutor. Maybe you agree it with your family. There's an agreement with someone somewhere, and you have to report in on them, and you get them to ask you about it. How's your course going? Like a personal trainer in fitness. If any of you do fitness and you have a personal trainer to keep you motivated, this is a person, you have to text them, this is what I ate today, this is the exercise I did today, this is how much I weigh today. You have to message them every day. You report into them, and if you don't do it, you're embarrassed. That's accountability. So that's how we stay motivated. Someone's asking, was it Cranswick Foods? No, it was not Cranswick Foods. No, not at all Cranswick Foods. I did have a very interesting job interview at Cranswick Foods. When was it? It was back in 2012, 2013. That's a story which I'm not going to repeat. It was rather amusing. And I'm not going to repeat it because Cranswick Foods are actually quite a good customer of ours. They use our online IOSH training and our online incident investigation training, and also I think we've got one or two NEBOSH students from Cranswick Foods as well. So I'm not going to say anything negative about Cranswick. Forgive me. Right, unless there are any more questions, my dear friends, I'm going to let you go. Who survived? 35 participants. Well done. Half of you made it to the end. Right, unless there are any more questions, log off. Rest easy, and best of luck with the exam next week or whenever you are taking it. Hasta la vista.